April 27th Special Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. I'd like to recognize that we are on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk today is Ms. Sheila Gurley. We also have the following councillors attending electronically. No, we don't. Cheryl's not here. Today's Governance and Priorities Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question on a matter that was considered by the committee today, please sign up on the sheet located at the table by the double doors to my left. Please note that the Council Procedure Bylaw states questions will only be taken on staff reports or other business items. I'm going to review decorum, but I assume things will be chill. So we'll skip through here. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Scurry? Don't have any?
No late items, Chair.
Great. And that brings us to agenda. Oh, could I get a motion for the adoption of the agenda? Councillor Prino, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All in favor? Motion carried. And agenda planning. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Council. So on your original agenda package, pages 3 to 5, outlines the upcoming topics and initiatives for your GPC meetings. The first page has the tentatively scheduled topics for May 11th, June 15th, September 28th, and a couple future GPC meeting topics that our dates are to be finalized still. On the second page is tentative topics. So these are topics that have not come from you yourselves. So these are either staff initiatives and or initiatives coming from the Council's strategic framework or the IAP priority actions. So we are looking for a council motion, should you agree, to have these scheduled into your upcoming GPC topics. You can have a motion for them all as a group, or we can go through them individually to see if these are, in fact, items you wish to see at your GPC meetings. So once I get a motion for these, if you're willing, then we would discuss any other items that aren't listed that you may wish to see at a future GPC meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Gurry. Got a question, Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair, and a question through you to Ms. Gurry. I really wanted to talk about the non-market housing, and I see that under the tentative topics for May the 11th, we've got Health and Housing Action Plan progress. Is that the same?
Yes, thank you, Chair, through you to Councillor Perino. Yes, for May 11th, the tentative topic we have there at the top of the list, that would include presentations from those individuals that have requested.
Okay, great. And do you need a motion for that as an individual item, or do you want the whole group? How are you looking for them?
Staff can invite presentations as well, and staff are planning to have those individuals come as a presentation. So no additional motion from you would be required, just a motion to have that topic on the agenda. So you can move that topic individually, and then the presentations coming from individuals that have sought that will be included. You don't need a motion for that, or you can do a motion for all of the topics, should you wish to see them.
It's up to you, Chair. I mean, I would like to see that on the agenda for May the 11th, and so if you want to do them all, or do you want to do them as individual items?
Go ahead and move the individual one, and then
the Health and Housing Action Plan, which is the discussion on the non-market housing, if I get a seconder.
Seconded by Councillor Manley. Any discussion, questions?
If I just may comment, I just think there's we've talked about this at length, but I think one of the areas that I really want to focus on is not just about supportive housing for those so in need. I'd like to also have a discussion about housing that's available for those that are on the verge of needing housing. So, I hate the term the working poor, but that's who we're thinking of, right? That's the group of people that I just think we need to keep from falling off the edge. And so I know I've talked to some developers about it, and that's the area that I would personally like to focus on.
Great, thank you. We have Councillor Manley and then Councillor Hammonds.
Thank you, Chair. We were talking about, at one point, about looking at transportation again and revisiting our transportation plans. I know a couple of councillors were talking about the right turn lanes and some of the other changes that have happened, and I thought that was one that was coming up at GPC, or is it we're waiting for a report that's coming to council? I'm not sure.
So I do have an answer to that, Councillor Manley. I don't know if you want to deal with this motion, and then I can talk to you about that, but staff have brought forward that as a potential topic. It's just not on this agenda. It would be on the May 11th agenda, I believe, so.
Okay. Yeah, so I support the current motion on the table. Like, workforce housing is what we would call it. Yeah, for people, low-wage workers, people we rely on in the community, and I think we need to see more of that in the community. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hammonds.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just noting May 11th, we're going to be looking at resiliency efforts of the water supply system. We're looking at frontage works and services. We're looking at health and housing action plan, which is, to my knowledge, that would be kind of where we are with the SPO, and resourcing that area of work. Now, Councillor Perino, which I completely, and I'm sure everyone at the table supports, a deeper conversation on workforce housing. I'm having a hard time seeing how we can cover those 4 topics in one GPC. I further understand that there are a lot of community conversations going on around workforce housing, and I wonder if that would lend itself to a focused GPC that does not include water supply system and frontage works and services.
Thank you, Councillor Hammonds. Question to staff, just in terms of the size of the other 2 topics and what we anticipate them in terms of being what will be presented to council. Any comments on that?
Through the chair, I can comment on the water one. This was just an update. Councillor Armstrong had requested that Bill Sims, even though he's not here, said it would be a very brief, like it should be very, very quick. The presentations that are coming with the, should this be approved, the Health and Housing Action Plan progress, they're similar to that item, yet not totally related, but they would just be presentations, so they wouldn't be, well, depending on the conversation. I'm not sure how long that item would take. And then the frontage works and services, I would look to staff for that as well. But we do have 4 hours scheduled for this meeting with a break in the middle.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I'm going to support the motion on the floor, but I just want to share that my hope at that GPC, we've got 1, 2, 3 staff presentations, that conversation on workforce housing would involve community, you know, in discussion with us as we know the GPC format to be the best for. Thank you.
In terms of prioritization, is it possible that item be presented first, especially if we've got presenters and potential delegations that are coming, that we have that item first on the agenda to prioritize it, as the other ones may be more informational?
We do have 2 presentations for that as well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Great. I'm not seeing any other questions. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. So there's a couple other items for June 15th and July 13th that would need approval from this committee. Any questions, comments? Okay, moved by Councillor Hammonds, the seconder, Councillor Eastmere. Any discussion? Seeing none, so we will approve those topics as well for the following dates. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
And
That brings us to reports, city plan, building permit function review update. So we've got a presentation from Alan Nielsen and some delegations. Staff, Do you have any comments before we get into the presentation? Director Holm.
Thank you, Chair, and to you and the committee, just a really brief introduction. So covered in the report, but Nielsen Strategies undertook a building permit function review in 2021, arrived at 7 recommendations intended to improve building permitting efficiency and engagement with industry in general. That report's included as attachment A to the staff report. In 2025, Governance and Priorities Committee requested that the implementation status of the 2021 report be reviewed, and Mr. Nielsen, representing Nielsen Strategies, is here to present the findings of his recent review and provide council with status on the 2021 implementation, as well as some additional recommendations that were identified through the most recent review. Just to highlight too, and there are recommended motions included in the report. There's actually an error in the first motion. It should be the 2027 to 2031 financial plan rather than 2027 to 2032. Apologies for that. And of course, staff are here to answer questions if you have any. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Mr. Nielsen, nice to see you again in 24-hour period.
Thank you very much, Chair. Nice to see you too. And nice to see committee as well. So thank you for having me here today to present my findings from the consultant report for the project that Mr. Holm just discussed, and to, of course, participate in any discussion and answer any questions committee would like to ask. Chair, I was asked as Mr. Holm mentioned, I was asked to do a review of the work that had been done pursuant to the 2021 building function review that I had, building permit function review that I had undertaken back at that time. A lot of time has passed, 5 years has passed since that earlier initiative, and the city wished to understand what changes have been made as a result of that initiative and what the outcomes have been achieved. And also then to understand any other steps the city may have taken out that maybe not necessarily related to the initial report, and some other items as well, which I'll get into over the course of my presentation. The presentation, Chair, has 6 different sections. The first is just to quickly review the purpose and scope, what I was asked to do and the scope of that study. The second was to very briefly outline the approach that I took to complete the work, look at the recommendations from the 2021 review, which was, and those recommendations were the main focus of the work I've just completed. Look at the outcomes from those and other changes that the city has made. There's also then some additional changes to consider that came in response to, or that I've identified in response to concerns raised by development industry and staff representatives over the course of this work. So we'll talk about those to end the presentation. And then, as I mentioned, of course, very happy to take questions. When we think about the purpose, Chair, the idea very simply was to understand how the function and the experiences of the development community have changed since 2021, and as a result of the recommendations in the 2021 review. That was the main focus of the undertaking. When we break that down a little bit, the city set out 4 different objectives to consider. The first was to evaluate the outcomes achieved as a result of the recommendations. The second was to look at the timelines. Timelines was a big driver of the initial work in 2021 and remains important both to industry in particular, but also to the city. So to look at the timelines that have been achieved in issuing different types of building permits, look at recommendations that have not been successfully implemented to date and understand any steps the city may wish to take to address those points. And then finally, look at other changes not included in the original recommendations, but that have been undertaken by the city to improve the function. As I mentioned a moment ago, there's a 5th part that I've added to that, and that is other changes, neither recommended in 2021 nor undertaken by the city on its own initiative, but additional changes which I identified in consultation with industry and with staff over the course of this work. I did want to point out, just to help committee understand the scope of this particular study, that whereas the earlier study did a full comprehensive review of the building permit function, that is the processes, the staffing of the section, the technology used, the relationships between the city and industry, This particular initiative was a little bit more focused as a check-in on the earlier study, what has happened since the earlier study as a result of the recommendations put forward. Council or committee will also understand that building permit portion of, the building permit function is a portion of a broader development approval process. And this particular study focuses on that building permit function. It doesn't look at that broader process. A lot of the issues that are of concern both to industry and the city may be related to that broader process. I'm happy to comment on those, but this study was particularly focused on the building permit function element of that broader process. I was asked, or I put forward, and I followed a proposed methodology which looked at a couple of different steps. The first was to look at all of the different materials related to the efforts that the city has taken, often in conjunction and collaboration with industry, to implement the recommendations from the 2021 report. Looked at all of those materials, then met with almost all of the city building officials to understand their perspectives on the changes that have been made and to understand their perspectives on the outcomes. I then connected with 4 different industry professionals and 1 developer, 3 professionals, and to understand their views on the outcomes, and also connected in a roundtable session with 8 members of industry in total and 3 members of staff. And that was in just at the end of 2025 to understand and to talk a little bit about some of the changes that perhaps were still necessary or still deemed to be necessary going forward. And then finally, of course, here with governance and priorities to report findings. The review that was undertaken in 2021 set out to achieve or to address a number of different objectives, and Mr. Holm talked about these briefly in his comments. The first was to focus on permit times, the turnaround times, the time it takes to issue a permit, to review an application and issue a building permit. A second was to limit the city's liability, to understand that development is a partnership, including the city as a regulator, the development sector as a builder, as a proponent. How does the city ensure that there's a good mix of liability and the holding of that liability in that relationship? The third then is to engage industry, or was to engage industry in looking at the solutions. And so we certainly engaged in industry in 2021 through a number of different mechanisms to look at the different solutions. The fourth was to engage staff, and that was done as well in 2021. And then the fifth objective in the 2021 work was to look at cost neutrality. Every city wants to ensure that, particularly a city the size of Nanaimo, wants to ensure that it is recovering all of its costs related to the issuance of permits. So we looked at that in 2021, and I can address that as well as part of my comments today. 7 recommendations were made in 2021, as committee knows, and those recommendations fell into 4 different categories, excuse me. One was the processes used or followed to issue permits. The second related to the staffing of the section and how the section was organized in general. That is the section that issues the permits. A third was to look at the use of technology, the city's use of technology, and how that perhaps could be improved. And then the fourth was to look at the relationships between the city and industry. The 7 different recommendations then fit into those different categories in different ways. And the first 2 recommendations dealt with a fast track process to look at different kinds of permits of applications that were received by the city and to review those applications in what was we termed at the time a fast track stream. The first was to establish that for targeted low-risk tenant improvements, that is commercial, low-risk commercial, and for residential projects as well. And then the second was to look at staffing for that particular fast track to ensure that there were dedicated staff to focus on the permits that were coming through that fast track stream. A third recommendation was to work with industry to create what was at the time presented as an approved professionals pilot project. And this pilot project, and I'll comment on this in a moment, really looked at it was done in response to the requests from industry to have the city rely more on the judgment and the materials provided by professionals, development consultants, working on behalf of proponents. So we looked at a model for that as an alternative to what is now in place, the Certified Professional Program, but we'll come back to that in a moment. The fourth recommendation in 2021 was to establish a joint building permit advisory working group, and that particular recommendation was in direct response to the objective around working with industry to develop solutions to some of the issues that arose. Fifth, looking at supporting investments in technology to ensure that there were to ensure that there were an online applications portal to allow applications to go through in a more a faster way, and to look also at a dashboard tool to ensure that not only the city but also proponents could track their applications through the system. Other advances as well related to the technology being used or the technology that could be used were also studied in that particular study. And then the sixth was to look at internal service agreements to set out the expectations and the roles and responsibilities for the processing of referrals. That is, the referrals from building permit to other internal agencies or teams within the city. And then finally was the seventh was to recover the costs associated with the recommendations through three different ways: savings through overtime, the pursuit of provincial incentive grants, which the city subsequently received, and then increases to building permit fees to align with those that were in place in other cities of a similar size. Those were the recommendations. Allow me now, Chair, I'll just go through quickly and talk about what happened under each of them and the outcomes that were achieved. The first point relates to the Fast Track program. And you recall that there were two recommendations under the Fast Track program. One was to establish the program and the other was to staff the program. Shortly after the report was submitted in 2021 and endorsed by council, the Fast Track program was set up, and that was set up in consultation with and collaboration with the joint working group that I talked about earlier. So all of the materials were put together to create that system. Staff were hired and assigned to that system by the city, and the city began receiving applications for those two different streams. Ultimately, both industry and the city working together decided to focus on the tenant improvement stream, not so much on the residential. So we created a fast track program for tenant improvements in particular. Staff report that, and the city's records show that interest has been strong and that applications that do satisfy the application requirements have achieved the kinds of time savings that were advertised. The group determined that 15 business day turnaround for tenant improvements was the target, and that, I understand from developer who has gone through the system successfully, has been achieved, and staff report that as well. The difficulty, however, is that most of the applications that have entered the stream haven't been eligible under the stream, and the main concern has been the completeness of applications or applications that are missing different elements, and so those applications have been rerouted to the standard processing stream, which takes longer than the fast track stream. So the overall success of the program has been limited. That notwithstanding, there are opportunities to expand the program, and there's work underway still to try to address some of the concerns that are keeping applications from becoming eligible for the program. The approved professionals pilot project, I noted earlier that that was kind of a made in Nanaimo initiative, as it were, or made for Nanaimo initiative that looked at identifying a small group of applicants, of development professionals who could be taken through a pilot project, who could submit materials that the city then would look to rely on more than it did other materials that coming through the stream. And that was a way for the city both to expedite the review of those processes, but also to address that liability issue as well. Industry and staff working again through the joint working group decided that that approach was going to be problematic. It was going to be problematic picking who should go into the pilot project, and it was also going to be problematic ensuring that enough focus was going to be put on improving the intake and the completeness of applications for the broader group. So the decision made through the joint working group was, instead of going with an approved pilot project, a professionals pilot project, was instead to look at a certified professional program, which I'll talk about as a relatively new initiative the city has undertaken a little bit later in the presentation. The Joint Building Permit Advisory Working Group, I've noted this already, that was set up immediately after council approved the recommendations from the 2021 report. This particular working group has been viewed, or is viewed, as successful both by staff and by industry. It has undertaken considerable work. It has put together a number of guides. It has contributed to the development of the Certified Professionals Program. It has contributed to the Fast Track Program and to a number of other initiatives the city and industry working together have put their minds to related to the intake of applications and the processing of applications. It is something that everybody has said should continue. The only difficulty in terms of the sustainability of it is that it is very much reliant on a small number of industry folks who have come forward to put their names forward and have contributed their industry, their efforts, and their time to work with the city to develop very useful initiatives and materials. The recommendation that I've got in the report here is for the different development associations that are active in Nanaimo to encourage their members to step forward as well, so that we're not reliant on just a very small group of individuals who are there regularly and devoting their time. Investments in technology, committee will know that that the city, a number of years ago, following the 2021 review, and not only because of that review, but that review certainly kind of picked up on what was important, and the city was also identifying what was important from some of its other initiatives. But at that time, the city undertook quite an investment looking at improvements in technology after some time working with a particular supplier that had to come to an end. The city was not culpable in that, but so the city regrouped, started to invest again, and has made tremendous headway, in my view, on that file. In talking with industry, there's again, that view is corroborated, that the city is really making strides, and the city continues to make strides. So there has been a number of e-apply initiatives, for example, that have been put forward. So we're seeing most, and by the end of, or by this time, 2027, we'll see most, if not all, permit types as part of the e-apply system, which will make it easier for folks to apply and hopefully should speed up the timelines as well. We're looking at Power BI, which will be very important, as we can see from experiences in Saanich and other places, to help staff identify where bottlenecks are occurring in the system and to deal with those bottlenecks. That's information that's harder to find now. That will be much easier to find after that. So a number of technology improvements underway that will show promise. They have shown some promise to date, and we're confident they'll continue to show promise going forward. The internal service agreements have not been put in place. This is an area which I think requires some attention. This is an area where, and Nanaimo's not unique in this respect. There is, when we look across organizations, across cities that are dealing with issues in their development permit process, or in our case, our building permit process, we do see delays in different parts of the organization as a result of a number of different factors. Maybe less than perfect communication, staffing issues, different priorities in different groups. There could be a whole number of reasons. Where we found success in other cities is to very clearly document who's responsible for what and who does what at what time, and how folks are going to be held accountable for what it is they sign up for. So I had suggested in 2021 that these service agreements be put in place. The city's recently done some work, not through my initiative, but through another initiative, looking at referrals, and that work also has, I'd come forward and said, we need some kind of MOU in between departments and among departments, MOU very similar to a service agreement. My recommendation is still to look at service agreements, and that comes forward at the end of my presentation and the recommendations. Cost neutrality initiatives, some have been taken. Overtime has been reduced. The city has received funding for different initiatives. Fees have not been comprehensively reviewed. There have been some adjustments made, but they haven't been comprehensively reviewed, so it's unclear whether the city is recovering the full amount of the function. We know that the city is recovering the direct costs of issuing building permits, but the support costs around technology and so forth is not as clear, at least to me, whether that amount has been recovered through the revenues coming in. I also recognize that fee reviews at this time in this market are very difficult for cities to undertake, so I'm not necessarily suggesting the city initiate that right now, just a comment that it hasn't, that particular review hasn't been done. I noted, and my terms of reference asked me to look at other changes that the city has taken outside of the recommendations. In my report, I mentioned that Nanaimo, similar to pretty much all cities and all cities this size, regularly is making improvements to the system, these incremental changes designed to try to improve things both for industry and for staff. There are, I won't comment on that myriad of changes that go on a daily basis, but I will talk about two specific initiatives that have been more substantial and that we hope will bear fruit. The first is the Certified Professional Program. The Certified Professional Program is a program that is province-wide. It is administered by the professional associations for engineers in BC, or engineers and geoscientists in BC, and for architects in BC. It's a program that's designed to provide enhanced training and education to engineers and to architects who register for the program, who are then certified as certified professionals, who can then move into cities that have these certified professional programs in place and submit materials that the cities then on the receiving end are able to look at with a lower degree of scrutiny than otherwise would be expected of a city. So it's a program through which cities can rely more on the judgment and the materials brought forward by professionals. As I had mentioned, I had not recommended this in 2021 because of a couple of factors. One was the relatively small number of certified professionals in British Columbia who were active and oversubscribed in the places in which they existed, and that is the programs existed. And the second was because at the time, in my view, the city didn't have enough of the types of developments that typically are used for certified professional programs, so very complex developments. The city, working with industry, decided in 2023 to introduce this program. There are now 14 jurisdictions in British Columbia. There are a few more, about 50% more architects and 50% more engineers registered as certified professionals. Nanaimo has had 9 applications go through the certified professionals program since it has been set up. And 2 of those have been, I understand, successful, and 7 have had issues involved with those and haven't created the kinds of savings or the kinds of success that we would expect from a certified professionals program. That record is not entirely surprising, and perhaps in retrospect was somewhat, if not predictable, not non-predictable, if I can put it that way, in the sense that this is a very developed program. It's a very elaborate program. It takes time for it to find its feet. So it is a program in which the city has invested considerably, and it's a program that still has a lot of merit, in my view. It still has a lot of potential. It's a matter now of finding out how to make it work best. So a recommendation that I put forward a little bit later, which I'll come to, deals with that particular issue. A second point, Chair, is a second change, I should say, deals with the small-scale multi-use housing type that has been introduced across the province through Bill 44 or through changes now to the housing amendments or the housing legislation. Council or committee will know then of Bill 44 that came forward to introduce small-scale multi-use housing across cities in all zones, in all residential zones. Zone for single-family or duplexes, the number of units automatically jumping to 3 to 4 on a smaller lot, up to 6 on a larger lot close to transit. That move created a form of housing that was not built in or not anticipated in the city's application processes. It caused some uncertainty for those doing the reviews because it introduced a whole different range of considerations, particularly around works and services. We were dealing with single-family areas with services put in place for single-family development. All of a sudden, the potential to have 3 or 4 times the amount of density, the amount of units on those areas brought in new servicing constraints and servicing concerns that hadn't been fully developed within the city and weren't fully understood both by the city and by industry. So as a consequence, there was some uncertainty through that system. The city has undertaken some work, some policy work and some development work or regulatory development work around small-scale multi-use housing. Some preliminary recommendations are laid out to create a different track for multi-use housing, or SSMUH, to make some changes to allow for some standardization of works and services and civil drawings that can be shared with developers to make it easier, and in general to both build capacity within the city and build capacity within the development sector to be able to handle and process these types of units with the care that they require that typically wasn't required when these zones were simply single family. A number of cities have been dealing with the same kinds of challenges. We're dealing with them here in Nanaimo, and the city has undertaken to try to address those. So there are some changes coming ahead on that, and I think that there will be some improvements in this particular category, including, most importantly, the improvements in the processing times. With respect to other changes to consider, Chair, as I mentioned, my brief was really to look at the changes that had been made as a result of the recommendations and to look at the other changes the city might have made over the time that weren't necessarily in the recommendations. In working with industry and working with the city, it almost goes without saying, or almost went without saying, that other concerns came to the fore and would be expected to come to the fore. And in fact, we found that in this process as well. So in the development roundtable that I facilitated at the end of 2025, we focused quite a bit on some of these other changes that were felt necessary. In reviewing all of that information, I've identified 5 changes that I think the city may wish to consider. One relates to the timing of design stage acceptance, which I'll talk about in a second. I'll go through each of these in a little bit more detail. The second is the resourcing of the development engineering section. The third looks at enhancing accountability on referrals, the point I made earlier with respect to the service agreements. The fourth is looking at risk tolerance and the city's approach to risk tolerance. And then the fifth is looking at the certified professionals program and how to make that more robust, how to make that more successful. The design stage acceptance, when we're dealing with complex projects, that is Part 3 projects, whether it's multifamily, commercial, or industrial, often it's commercial, but also multifamily too, we have a number of different works and services concerns and considerations the city has to look at, and the applicants, through their development professionals, also have to look at. The design drawings come into the city, that is the drawings that deal with off-site works and that deal with on-site works for the particular projects. They come in through the building permit process currently. They come and the building section receives that information and passes it to development engineering as a referral. So the development engineering and the folks in that department then need to look at that material and ensure that it is consistent with the city's works and services standards. That process can take some time, and particularly in our case with our development services engineering, which in my view is understaffed, which I'll talk about in a moment as well. We've got, because that can take some time, we then see delays in the building permit process, part of the overall development process. What we've heard from developers, or what I heard from the development community, both prior to and at the development roundtable, was seeking some allowance from the city to decouple the design stage acceptance portion of the process from the building permit process. So in other words, that design stage acceptance can be sought and achieved or approved by achieved by the development community, by the applicant, prior to the beginning of the building permit process. Right now it runs as part of the building permit process, and the building permit can't be issued until the applicant has DSA, or design stage acceptance. What developers have asked through the industry roundtable and its discussions prior to that roundtable was to move that, or allow that earlier in the process, even before the building permit process begins. So either at the development permit process or in the space in between, which often occurs. That allows then city development engineers to receive, look at, start to process that. It is longer than it should be taking at that stage as anyway under development engineering, but try to start that early, try to hone that a little bit, speed that up, have that in place for the building permit process, which can then happen fairly quickly relative to how it's happening now. Building permit process, the issuance of the building permit is an important part of the process. It often unlocks financing. It really obviously it allows construction to begin and so forth. So get that part of the process as fast as possible, allow the DSA to begin earlier, so allow applicants to submit their civil drawings before the building permit process. That means for applicants, there's going to be some upfront costs that are typically done a little bit later in the process. We heard from the industry professionals, that's okay. It can be a bit of a risk for the city in the sense that the city is assigning resources to review civil engineering drawings prior to the building permit process under the scenario, with no guarantee that the process for building permit would actually go ahead. There's a way around that, however, simply by changing the fee structure to put more of that up front with the amounts to be credited to the development later in the building permit process. So again, this is something that has been asked for by development, and it seems reasonable, and so what I'm suggesting is that the city look into that and allow for that to happen. With respect to the development engineering section, the development engineering group is a key resource on many files that come to the city, whether it's small-scale multi-use housing, which is a new port that goes to development engineering now, or in particular, more complex building permit applications. The section is challenged in its ability to do its part of the process in a reasonable period of time. And in my view, part of that is a big part of that is related to staffing. We have vacancies in the department. We've had a hard time filling those vacancies. We've also then, even with those vacancies, I believe there's a scope and there's a merit in having a higher capacity in the department. So I've recommended, and I'll come to this in a moment, the addition of one full-time equivalent to that department, an engineering technician, an additional engineering technician. And one of the reasons I think that that's useful is, first of all, there are a number of other changes recommended in this report that would try to improve or bring improvements to the overall process as well. So this isn't just going right away to a staffing increase, because that would be irresponsible without other changes. The second, though, as well, is one of the things we heard from applicants at the roundtable and in the interviews before the roundtable was that particularly as we're dealing with more complex building types, and particularly as standards and requirements continue to change, it's very important for applicants, for the civil engineers who are working for the applicants, to have the ability to work with development engineers to understand on an ongoing basis how plans may be accepted, how drawings should be, what the implications of different suggestions might be. So have that ongoing communication. Right now, the development engineering section can't have that. We're having trouble participating in pre-application meetings as well, which are so important to these kinds of projects. They just don't have the capacity to do it. So in addition to some of the other changes related to processing and so forth, I've suggested adding some capacity to that section. With respect to the accountability on referrals,
Mr. Nielsen, we got a question here from one of the councilors, if it's okay. Go ahead. You're good.
Thank you, Chair. I was curious on how this one relates to the city's had a temporary full-time technician posted for some time, and I was trying to figure out the relationship between this recommendation and where the department's at with respect to vacancies and that posting.
sure. Chair, I wonder if through to Councillor Brown, I wonder if I can ask Mr. Holm just to comment on that. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Chair, through to Councillor Brown. So the temporary posting that you've seen on an ongoing basis, from time to time, there are staff that are on leave for various reasons that we're not able to post a permanent position, and that's what you're seeing there. So we're only able to post temporary, casual or temporary, not a permanent position. So that's what you're seeing there. We have had other vacancies, and we're anticipating a retirement actually at the end of this week, so in that section as well. So you will see, there are also internal posting requirements prior to postings going external, but what you're seeing there is an external posting for a temporary position due to a leave in the section.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. With respect to accountability on referrals, Chair, I had mentioned earlier in 2021 recommending that internal service agreements be set up to ensure there was clarity on roles and responsibilities, on expected timelines and other expectations, and to then hold staff accountable in different groups for ensuring that those referrals get done. That recommendation did not proceed, or was not, it was accepted by council, but implementation hasn't proceeded. I'm suggesting that be brought back into the fold, that we put back again as a recommendation to act on. I think that particularly with some changes to overall capacity and with some of the other changes identified here, I think that the development engineering and other departments can start to be brought into the overall referral process with a little bit more rigor perhaps, and some accountability there as well. So I think that that's going to be important in my view. The Certified Professionals Program, as I mentioned earlier, the city has undertaken quite an investment in and made an investment in developing this program. It's one of 14 local governments or authorities with jurisdiction, one of 11 cities that has now the Certified Professionals Program in place. There's a set of bylaws that committee will know because council has received and approved some of these things. Their bylaws have to be changed, materials have to be developed, the manual from the professional associations has to be added to. All that's been done for the city of Nanaimo 2 of the 9 applications have been considered a success, both by the city and the proponents. Those have had good time savings, not earth-shattering, but time savings over what would otherwise be accomplished. And I anticipate that as the program continues to evolve and as changes continue to be made and improvements to that program, that we're going to see even better timelines on that. In order to 7 of the applications that have been processed through that process or through that program have not been successful. And in those cases, there's a number of different reasons. I don't know all of the reasons, but some of them relate to different expectations around applications, different expectations on roles and responsibilities, and so forth. What I've suggested is, given the investment made, given the interest in the program by the development sector, and given the success of the program in some other jurisdictions, I think that there is merit in holding on to the program and learning from the applications that have gone through the program to date. So I've suggested an audit of a couple of the applications that maybe haven't been as successful as was desired, to find out what were the issues and how do we then apply those learnings to the program to make it easier and more successful for all future applications that come through the program. Risk tolerance, when we make applications through a building permit process, the building officials receiving those will review all of the applications, all the materials against different sections of the building code, the BC Building Code. The BC Building Code is founded on health and safety, so most of the items in there are health and safety related. As you can imagine, it's a large book, and there are different requirements in there, some of which have more inherent risk from a health and safety perspective than others. There's a perception in industry that the city does not sufficiently differentiate between high and low risk items when it does the reviews. In other words, it reviews at a fairly deep level all of the different items or the applications against all of the different standards. The city does not agree with that perception. It was a source of some discussion at the roundtable at the end of 2025 and in discussions I had with industry as well. What I've suggested is that, and in my view, there is some scope for the city to change its risk tolerance, to have a greater differentiation between low and high risk. And as a result of that differentiation, that greater differentiation having some savings in terms of time and certainty for the applicants. So I've suggested that the city work with industry through what is now a development delivery partnership. That is something that has recently been set up at the city management level here, and with industry associations active in Nanaimo, working with that group and supported by the Joint Advisory Group, which is a more technical body, to figure out where the city can apply greater differentiation between high and low risk items. So in essence, try to change the perceived culture that exists right now. Chair, there are 5 recommendations in total that speak to the different, largely to the different changes that I've identified as a result of the discussions with industry and with staff that were unique to this particular process. The items that were underway from 2021, some of those are ongoing. Other changes the city is making already with respect to the small, the SSMUH housing, for example. I'm not commenting on those, but with respect to the changes I've outlined, the other changes for the city to consider, each of those changes comes with a recommendation which is identified in the paper. The first is to decouple the issuance of the design stage acceptance from the building permit process. And I will mention, Chair, that in the document, I apologize, there's a small mistake in that recommendation. In the document, in the report, it says to put it with the development permit stage. It should simply say before the building permit stage. In some cases, it may be part of the development permit stage. In other cases, it may be outside of that, but before building permit. So the key bit is before building permit. The second is to add 1 full-time development engineering technician to the development engineering group. The third is to introduce internal service agreements. The fourth is to do a audit of a sample of of applications received and reviewed through the certified professional program. And then the fourth is to work with industry representatives through the development delivery partnership supported by the joint working group to explore the potential for greater differentiation on the basis of risk. Chair, I will stop there and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. Much appreciated, and we'll open it up to the committee here for questions. So, Councilor Manley.
Thank you, Chair. In the 5 recommendations, the adding a full-time development engineering technician, you said that that won't necessarily be successful without other changes. Is that related to the other 4 recommendations that you've made, or are there other things that we should be doing to ensure that that position was successful?
Thank you, through the chair, to Councillor Manley. Yes, primarily to the other 4 changes as part of the package. I feel that with, and there's some other changes I know the city is looking at as well. So one of the things, if we look at the development engineering section right now, it's not only focused on the review of development applications, it's got other responsibilities. Some of those responsibilities may be able to, I understand the city's looking at this, could be moved to outside of that department to others. So that's a change I think that would help as well. And I think too, the city has already been active on looking at, in response to workloads, and for example, on looking to where they can involve through the use of contractors in a selective way to deal with particular types of applications to try to manage the workload as it exists now. So I think if we continue some of those things, continue to look at the workload and the scope of responsibilities of development engineering, and then in addition, look at some of the changes that they relate to the use of technologies, which is underway as well. I believe that and also then through the small scale multi-use housing to look at some of the templates and some of the standards changes that are being introduced for development engineers to receive and to look at. I think with those changes and perhaps some others as well, we would see that success in combination with adjusting the capacity of the department.
Okay, thank you. One more question just about the e-apply system. Is that flagging for the applicant problems with their application? Is it highlighting what needs to be done or what they should be doing? Or is that the intent behind getting an AI system to assist with that, with the applicants as well as with staff?
Thank you. Again, through the chair to Councillor Manley, it's not flagging them as much as I think as the city may wish to develop it to do that. I think once some other changes come into the system to look at the intake, that may be, so Power BI, for example, but the real value is going to be a little bit in how to flag things from coming into the system, but will also be through the use of particular Power BI, looking at where the bottlenecks are occurring. So a file comes into the city and it sits there until it's ready to be assigned. That period of time, the city wants to look at it, the city wants to focus in on. Or it could be, it goes from this desk to this desk. Well, what's the delay at this point? And with the Power BI, that will allow, and other tools, that will allow the city really to zero in on that and try to understand what the delay is there. In some cases, the delay will be internal to the city, and that's stuff the city can control. In some cases, it will be external because files are missing, or applications are missing parts, and the city then can zero in, understand exactly what's missing, and work very quickly with the applicant to rectify that, we hope. So there will be some gatekeeper role at the beginning, but I think the real value will come a little bit later through the process.
One more, if I may. And when we're talking about AI, are we talking about a sovereign system that is designed like machine learning within the city itself, or are we looking at what other cities might be using in terms of technology? We're not talking about using ChatGPT or anything crazy like that. It's going to be very much an internal type of system that is very much custom designed for this process.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if I could turn it over to Kerry here. Thank you.
Through the chair to you, Councilor Manley. And if I could ask you to rephrase the question, is the question about the AI system that we would be investigating to use?
Yeah.
Please go
Are
ahead.
there systems already in place that we could sign up for? Or like, is this a sovereign type of system that would be unique to the city? So we're not, throwing questions out into the AI universe, but it's very much kind of a machine learning sort of setup that works on data points specifically related to the applications.
Okay, thank you for the clarification, and through you, the chair to you, Councilor Manley. So we're not currently using any AI for permanent approvals. The systems that we would be considering are those systems that are already in place for other cities, such as City of Vancouver, City of Kelowna, and City of Surrey, and some other areas in Ontario. In terms of sovereign AI, this would be their system, and I would make the assumption that when our peers are using it, they would be doing the necessary compliance checking, doing privacy impact assessments, et cetera, to make sure that the data as it was used would stay within Canada and that it wouldn't be used for other learning systems or other machine learning tools. To answer your question earlier about the use of AI in terms of checking, this is something that we want to investigate as well, because your other question about can he apply flag challenges, for example, currently it can't. It doesn't have the level of smarts. There are tools out there that are being used by some of our peers that do exactly that. So as the application comes in, the system will use its functionality based on the modeling that we would create, the training that we would create. So here's all the various bylaws, here's the requirements. As a diagram or a drawing would come in, the system would check it, identify if it was compliant. If so, move ahead. But if it was missing anything, it would flag it back to the requester, identifying specifically where there were challenges. So rather than have staff members review it and go back and forth with the developer, it would be the system itself that would flag it based on the training that we would provide. So it would go back to the developer, identifying exactly where there were challenges so that they can make the corrections and resubmit.
Okay. Where are we at with the new system we're working on?
So through the chair to Councillor Manley, investigation. So we'd be looking at Mr. Holman mentioned earlier, we'd be looking to a pilot as early as maybe, I don't want to make any predictions in terms of how early it would be, but these would be within the 2027 budget and going forward, because there would be a capital investment to acquire the service or to work with the vendor for the service, and hopefully have something in place for 2027.
Okay, thank you. Got more questions, but I'll wait.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair. And a question through you. The reason why you're hearing the discussion about AI is because we were at a conference on the weekend where, Alan, you spoke. That was great. And the issue about the AI seminar that I think, Councillor Manley, you may have been in attendance. Well, it was surprising to see, and he actually used Nanaimo as the situation, but he was able to, a person who had very little experience in building, was able to apply for an application, and the application told the person when they were on track or off track. So it never dealt with the city at all. It just told them what was right and what was wrong. And it's interesting because at the time when I saw it, I thought every single time I've gone to our CAO and said, this application, you know, these people are waiting to find out whether or not, like why their permit is taking so long to come. Well, the reason is inevitably because the application is lacking pieces. So it's like before it even gets to our staff, it needs to have a process where it gets vetted by itself and tells me where I'm right and where I'm wrong, so that it's up to me as the person bringing the development or the application forward to make sure it's right before it ever gets put into the hands of the staff. And I was surprised that we didn't talk about it more here. So, I mean, it blew me away seeing it, and he used Nanaimo as the basis for the story. So their programs are out there. They're definitely there. And if we can keep our staff away from actually having to do the work, because the program told them when they were right or when they were wrong. So I don't.
And perhaps, Chair, in response to Councillor Perino, yes, the report does mention that the city is looking to introduce AI for that exact purpose. How do we make sure that everything is complete in the application, and where it's not complete, how do we assist the applicant to identify where those parts are? And I think, as we just heard from Carrie, that the city continues in that vein to try to find where to look at the experience in Kelowna, to look at the experience in Vancouver, look at the experience in other jurisdictions in Ontario, to see how is that working. And it sounds like at AVICC that there was a good presentation of that, which demonstrated what's possible. So,
and the only thing just to add to that is that it keeps it out of the staff's hands, because the application should be 99% done and ready to move to staff, so that simply it becomes a check. Right?
And I think, if I may, Chair, as well, just to Councillor Perino, I think that there's definitely the potential for some kinds of permits for that to happen. If we look at Kelowna, for example, AI is very effective on dealing with very simple permits. Yes. On some of our permits that are taking longer than we would want them to take, it's important, for example, for the applicant's professionals the architects and the engineers to be able to sit down and work with city officials to understand, if we did this, how does that look? What's the city's intention behind this? To have that face-to-face, so it may not be the solution for all types of permits, but to your point, Councillor, it may deal with enough to allow focus to be put, the face-to-face focus to be put on other,
That's
on
right.
other needs.
That's right. I can't imagine the horror of taking an application in and waiting 6 months only to be told that I'm missing something. You know, it needs work, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you very much, Chair, through you, if I may, to Mr. Nielsen. Thank you, sir. Always enjoy your presentations. Two questions. First of all, I'm somebody who is always interested in the concept of best practice. And I would just like some assurance that your recommendations for change or possible change are based on some comparisons with other jurisdictions that seem to operate, can I say, more effectively in processing than we do. You've given us a comparison of staffing levels, but I'm just thinking more in terms of our actual processes. And I know you've touched on some and your recommendations reflect that, but are your recommendations based on what you see in other areas that are working?
Thank you, through the chair, to Councillor Thorpe. The simple answer is yes, and I think I can elaborate on that simply by pointing to particular recommendations. The recommendation, for example, on risk tolerance. Cities simply cannot continue to have an approach that looks at all items as higher risk. And I'm not saying that that is always the case in Nanaimo. I think the staff would push back on that and say we do differentiate. I think there's scope for there to be greater differentiation. We see that in some places that are moving permits through faster. I think the Certified Professionals Program is a best practice program, and it does work well in some places, and I think the city's finding its feet on that, and the industry here is finding its feet on that. I think there's opportunities for that, so I continue to invest in that. I think that development engineering, when we look across municipalities, is often the place that get where, because they have broad responsibilities, because they're dealing with complex buildings that are becoming more complex all the time, particularly with new types of permits like small-scale multi-use housing that's going into areas that nobody anticipated would have servicing issues because they were putting in services for lower densities. Changes that are underway for that, those are best practice as well. So the city is moving in the direction of what I would consider best practices, yes.
Great, thank you very much. And my second question, if I may, Chair, and it relates to Councillor Perino and Councillor Manley's earlier questions regarding technology. And I give this question as an admitted Luddite, but I noted in your 2021 report, it was on page 42, the sector's reliance on current online process creates additional problem related to incomplete applications and the time spent going back and forth because of that, whereas previously under the counter-based process, applications would be received directly. Basically, everybody's got an eye on them and can deal with incompletions or problems right then and there. So to me, that doesn't jibe with the recommendation of increasing more in technology, although I recognize that it's changing quickly. And I was at the AI presentation with Councillor Perino, and that pilot project looked extremely interesting, but would be, in some ways, be better served, I guess, to back up and go face to face and try and solve problems sitting around a table.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for pointing that out, Councillor, and through the chair to Councillor Thorpe. And yes, that's great. I'm going to go back to that earlier report because you've identified that item on the page that you identified, Councillor. I think when we look now, the technology, the e-apply, can benefit the city in different ways. It does make things easier for applicants to put their applications in. To your point, however, you're quite right. Back in 2021, there were issues through the use of online and through the absence of face-to-face. In that early report as well, it did talk about the importance of pre-application meetings, particularly for complex projects. And so what I'm suggesting is continue with those pre-application meetings, and indeed, through enhancing the capacity of development engineering, make sure we've got development engineers in those pre-application meetings. So we get exactly, as you pointed out, Councillor, that face-to-face back and forth, so we understand what it is we're submitting, the city understands what's going to be coming forward, and can offer advice in those pre-application gatherings to help make for a better application and a more complete application. The e-apply then is simply a way for everything to come in and be sent into the city. But the face-to-face stuff is so important, and that's achieved through the face-to-face at the pre-application stage, but also then throughout, as I mentioned earlier, which development industry is asking for, that regular ongoing consultation with particularly development engineering on how do we ensure we are meeting the works and services requirements, because those are finicky in some cases. They require discussion in many cases. They require kind of a look at something. Is this going to work? All of those exchanges really important. So I'm glad you've identified the importance of that face-to-face. It remains very important, and I think we achieve it alongside an e-apply for actually submitting the materials.
All right, thank you. Yeah, it sounds like the pre-application phase is very, very important in this whole process.
Particularly for complex projects, yes.
Right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Nielsen, for the presentation and the work. I have some comments and then a question. The first comment comes from a paragraph in your report that says it's not entirely clear 5 years after the 2021 review that permit turnaround times have improved. And it goes on to say that's because the way that we track it doesn't actually allow us to calculate whether we're making improvements. So that's comment number one, and I hope you can comment on it. It's difficult to say we need to improve permit times, but we don't actually have a system that measures permit times. I think that's a problem. And I wonder if technology is going to help us there. The second piece that really stood out to me was that 2 out of 9 of the CP permits came in not ready to be processed. And I think that's really good feedback for the development community to hear. And I'm really curious to hear from the audience today who are going to come and present to us to kind of share some reflections on that. I understand the CP program is, we're going to review it, and it's brand new, and it you know, there's going to be things that we have to work out in it, but that stat stuck with me. The third one, and this is the one that I really struggled with, and that's that between 21 and 2026, we didn't see any improvements in the internal service agreements. That's a problem. And I'm reading that as permits are coming into the city, and we're not moving them through departments quickly enough to meet recommended targets. So I'm seeing you nod, yes, that is accurate. So we have made no progress on that in 5 years. That's hard. My question, amongst a million, but this is specifically for staff. I was really curious about the recommendation about risk. So I'm just going to pull it up. That this working group explores the potential for greater differentiation during application reviews on the basis of risk. That's a big statement, and I'm really curious how staff will operationalize that. Thank you.
So, Chair, just looking for some guidance. Shall I address the first comment and then pass that to staff? Okay, thank you. And thank you through the Chair to Councillor Hemmons. Thank you very much for those points. I think with respect to your first point on the timelines, it is, yes, I think the city understands that its current system doesn't allow for meaningful data on the timelines. We can look at when things come in and when things leave, but a lot happens at that timeline within there where things change hands. The city has it for some time, the applicant has it for some time. Simply looking at when it's in and when it's out doesn't do a lot. It's not terribly meaningful. So I agree with you that that's an oversight. I think that and the city is very clear on that, and with the additional technology, the city is looking to do what some other cities have been successful in doing, which is to have a bit of a kind of chess clock move where the city can control when it has it, and then it stops the clock, and then it doesn't control when it doesn't have it, and then when it starts the clock again, it controls when it has it. It's in those moments that the city has it that we want to be as efficient as possible. And that's what we want to be measuring, and in my view, we want to get to the point where there's targets applied there, and there's reporting out on those targets. So yes, I do know also with some of the technology that the city is looking at, and I don't know if Kerry wishes to speak to those, or if Jeremy wishes to, but the technology, I'm almost certain, will allow for those timelines to be more meaningful.
Follow up if I may then, just on that specifically. Thank you. In your recommendation about service agreements, would you recommend that we include hard timelines between departments? Is that, I didn't see that
Yeah.
directly embedded in your report, but it's important for us to hear if that is a recommendation.
Thank you through the chair. I would recommend that, yes. I think without targets, and I think we see in some other places, they've put hard targets in place. And that doesn't necessarily, those hard targets, there's an accountability there, which is important. They have to be more than aspirational. They have to be realistic, but I think it's important to have those in place.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And then with respect to the CP program, sorry, just very quickly, the CP program you mentioned, I fully agree that I think that the audit which is recommended in here of a sampling of applications will be helpful not only to industry but also to the city, because I'm not saying that all of the issues are on one side or the other. I think that audit will help identify where some of the issues are that can be addressed to ensure that the city gets the most from the investment it's made and continues to make, and that industry also is able to take advantage of a system that in other places has brought timeline savings.
Great, thank you. And if I could just have staff comment on the risk, how we will operationalize that. It seems somewhat impossible to me. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, thank you through the chair to Councillor Hemmons on the risk question. That's a tricky one, and I may not be the best qualified to answer. Really, I'll preface it by saying, well, building code is largely a prescriptive instrument, and there is room for, and we see in more complex buildings, the use of alternative solutions, which are solutions proposed by professionals that don't strictly comply with the code, but achieve the objectives, the underlying objectives of the code. Definitely there's room for and involvement of building officials in accepting alternative solutions. But when it comes to strict compliance with the code, you know, we'd expect that ultimately, you know, through the review of applications, the permit approval, and then the inspections, and ultimately occupancy and the sign-off through the professionals involved in the complex projects, that they would be code compliant. I think it's probably what we're looking at or talking about is during the review phase, and this is something we can get into. I think the report speaks to working with the Joint Building Permit Advisory Working Group, which the participants are technical experts. We have an engineer and an architect as primary participants there, as well as working with the Development Delivery Partnership as well to look at you know, where there might be some I guess a difference in approach that focuses more on life safety matters, which to be honest, a lot of the issues that we do identify with major projects relate to life safety. But then there are, I guess, probably maybe fair criticisms. I'm not sure that more time is spent than necessary on some of the lesser, I guess, life safety related items in the code. So there's provisions around accessibility and you know, a number of different I guess policy objectives that are in the code that aren't specific to life safety. But yeah, there's criticism that there's more time spent, I guess, on some of those details than their experience in other jurisdictions. Yeah, that's about as far as I can go to comment on that. But the life safety, I think, obviously, I think industry would agree. Those are obviously non-negotiable. Those are areas that, and building officials obviously have a duty to, as well as professionals involved, have a duty to address those as well. So it'll be, as far as how we operationalize it, I think it'll be some conversation with some of the technical experts involved to see how we could do that and what their experience is elsewhere, and where we can focus our efforts without undertaking additional risk, or without spending additional time in areas that maybe aren't as valuable. Thanks.
Thank you. Good. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mr. Nielsen. Figure 2.2, and this is kind of building off some of those questions. Figure 2.2 kind of outlines, and it says in the report, it's a simplified process, overview of the building permit process. And my question is really around, as you shift from the more prescriptive aspects of the code and more simpler buildings into more complex buildings where alternative solutions can be put forward, are we utilizing different processes, and what are the points of discretion? Like, who's making the judgment call on what's acceptable throughout that process? And just building on that, what is the framework that those folks are using to exercise that discretion when reviewing alternative solutions put forward?
Oh, yeah, sure. Did you want to say? Oh, sure. Oh, I can speak to him if you want. You go first.
Thank you, through the chair, to Councillor Brown. I think I'll ask Mr. Fox to come up and speak to that. It's quite a detailed question with respect to how alternative solutions are handled, and really, I mean, the essence of it, the building officials are and the chief building official is really charged with ultimately determining what is acceptable as far as alternative solutions. But I'll let Mr. Fox speak to the criteria and what's considered. Thanks.
Through the chair, alternative solutions for each prescriptive building clause that's in the building code, there's an objective and a functional statement associated with it. And so the report writer provides evidence towards that those objectives and that those functional statements have been met through the report. So things like, say, travel distance might be limited, and in building code, fire safety, typically it's like the time it takes to exit the building, depending on the fire load and type of building that you're in. And if you, say, sprinkle a building, then of course you can increase that travel distance or that distance to the exit because you're suppressing the fire in its at its origin. So there's different techniques that they use, but they have to provide it in a manner that we can determine that the minimum standard of safety that's outlined in the building code has been met, and that determination is made by the building official ultimately through experience and, you know, also in reviewing other decisions that have been made in other jurisdictions. That's essentially how it's done. In practice, alternative solutions were meant to offer more design flexibility, but what we find has been happening is that there are errors or mistakes made in the original submissions, and these alternative solutions are proposed in order to fix those errors. So if you think of one example would be that one of the CP projects that we had where the fire department access has to be, the truck has to be within 3 meters and no further than 15 meters from the front door, and it was, the way it was designed, it was actually at 28 meters. And then a alternative solution came in when that was caught in order to try and address that extended distance that the fire department would have to travel to access the building, and ultimately it was rejected.
I have one more question on this particular topic. Do we have anything, when someone submits a building permit application, and obviously this is for probably more likely for complex buildings, where they flag if they're using, and then does that get treated in the same process, or is there a different process for review?
Sorry, through the chair to Councillor Brown, if you're asking if the alternative solutions are flagged when they come in?
Correct.
And if there's a different process for how they're reviewed?
Yes.
No, it's the same process. We would like them to flag them and have a conversation with us beforehand, and that's where these pre-application meetings come in. So if there is something, there's a lot of alternative solutions that are broadly accepted by industry, such as exit exposure issues, where you might have a fire compartment that's exposing the exit and you put a water curtain behind the glazing to cool the glass to keep it in place. And those are broadly accepted and they should probably be codified. But then when there's things that are sort of new or haven't been reviewed or discussed with us prior, then having that conversation before the application is submitted is often helpful.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, maybe I'll just add, and Mr. Fox can jump in if I'm wrong on this, but so the Certified Professional Program, there is actually a requirement, as Nanaimo's adopted it, there's a requirement to have a pre-application meeting prior to submitting the application. It's also clear that if there's an alternative solution anticipated, proposed, that it would be discussed prior to submitting, and if it's not submitted with the application would be incomplete. So that's, you know, one area that we try to address. You know, we need people to, if they're proposing an alternative solution, to think about that in advance and discuss that with staff in advance, with the building official in advance.
Okay, thank you. And one last question, just because it kind of builds off of what Councillor Hemmons was asking. With respect to the work done between the sort of, I would say, almost service expectations between departments, I'm just curious, why wasn't anything advanced in 5 years?
Thank you, through the chair, to Councillor Brown. So various reasons, obviously workloads and staffing largely, which is sort of, you know, obviously counterproductive. It's difficult to implement a service agreement when you don't have, when the resources aren't in place to meet the intent of the agreement, and as well as focus on other priorities and initiatives. But yeah, that's largely the reasoning that I could speak to. Thanks.
Okay, and if this is endorsed, are we bringing in additional resources to develop those? I'm just curious how that would be implemented moving forward.
Through the chair again, to Councillor Brown. So obviously, so we have had certain specific areas that have in recent years suffered some staffing deficiencies pretty significantly. Planning is one area that now we're down to 2 staff that are needing to be hired in that area to bring it back to full staffing, and we're well underway with that initiative. So we're excited about having full staff complement there, hopefully soon as well. As Mr. Nielsen's spoken to quite extensively to the development engineering section, after Friday, we'll be down to 50% staffing in that area, and we're needing to do some work there to build that staff complement back up. I wouldn't want to commit those staff to referral commitments that they're not able to meet when they're at 50% staffing levels. So obviously we need to bring those levels up before committing to, especially on the development engineering side, before committing that area to turnaround times. As well, though, Mr. Nielsen flagged, we are looking at other options as far as consulting support in that while we're undertaking the hiring there.
Great, okay, thank you.
Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Back to the chess clock. Speaking with one of the major developers in town, he basically said we shouldn't be trying to figure out, the council shouldn't be trying to figure out what, you know, all the details of the speeding up the permit process, that we should just set timelines for staff and just leave it to staff to figure out how they're going to meet those timelines. And I'm curious if there are benchmarks in other communities related to that, like, are there examples that you have of benchmarks for that chess clock timeline?
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Manley. There are some other municipalities that have done exactly that. Surrey is one, for example, that has, and they're still working through it, but they've had for a few years now. For certain types of permits, they've had a bit of a chess clock system, and they've said at this stage, we want to get we want a from receipt to review letter. We expect to have this amount of time from, and then there's other targets throughout. Edmonton has taken a slightly different approach. They've taken an approach that looks at from right from the beginning to the out, and they put a timeline in that, and they try to work with applicants to expedite their review of materials that come back from the city. Saanich is also, if they haven't got it in place, they've been looking at that kind of thing. So there are some other places. The time is going to be unique to the specific jurisdiction based on staffing, other considerations, and so forth. But I think the key is, I know the development industry has been asking for these timelines for some amount of time now. At least in 2021, it was a request as well. And in my view, the key is to get the changes in place, get to a point where we can say, okay, we can have certain targets that we're comfortable we can meet, make those aspirational but also realistic. The difficulty in putting in timeline targets that are not terribly meaningful is that everybody becomes cynical and staff morale starts to suffer. So I think we want to get to the point where we have timeline targets in place. I'm not sure we're quite there yet, but I think with some of the changes to technology and some of the changes to streamlining the amount of workload for development engineering, looking at the capacity there, looking at some of the other changes outlined in the document, I think the city will be at the point where it can start to look at targets at different phases.
And those targets would be unique to the community itself?
I think, and through the chair again, I think it's got to be a little bit unique. It's got to reflect kind of the staffing that are in place, the resources the city can put into it, the technologies the city has in place. Every city is going to be a little bit different. And but I think they're not wildly different, but I think a consideration of trends across municipalities that have adopted that, and there haven't been a lot, but some have, but also unique to or specific to Nanaimo circumstances too, I think would be a helpful way to look at that.
Okay, thank you. Just one more, if I may. Through you, I think we were at an RDN presentation, and there was an image of what the building code looked like, and I think it was like this in the 1970s and like this in the 1990s, and now it's a stack like this. And I'm curious about whether municipalities have a role in actually advocating to the federal government about the federal building code and the province about the provincial building code about simplifying this process, because the more complex it is, the more difficult it is for everybody concerned. And so I'm just curious about your thoughts about what we might do in terms of advocating to simplify, or is that a realistic thing to ask for?
And thank you through the chair to Councillor Manley. It's a good observation, and I think if we look, you're quite right, the BC building code has become a lot thicker. The Vancouver building code is, as they've added entire binders. So there's different levels, I suppose, of specificity and of rigor and of volume. I think, in my view, there's a bit of a trade-off. There's a sweet spot in some senses. As we learn more about building construction, as we learn more about engineering and so forth, the materials that can be used and how we put things together and how we connect things, we apply that knowledge, and we do it because we want to, and Jeremy talked about this a moment ago, we do that because we want to enhance life and safety. So we want to maximize those benefits, while at the same time we need to be cognizant of the breadth of standards and regulations and the work required to meet those. And if you talk to some from industry, they'll say, you know, it's 50 years or 20 years ago, you could submit something that was a lot slimmer than it is now. There were so many more attachments that have to be brought in. So I sympathize, I have empathy with the applicants who have to put all that together. As you quite rightly point out, it is driven by the National Building Code, the provincial code, all of those requirements. Can the cities do something to deal with that? I suppose advocacy is always an option. I'm not sure that every city would consider it a concern, to be frank. I think that for many people, the optimization of the health and safety trumps the concerns over the breadth of regulations.
Okay, thank you for that.
Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair, and just a couple more questions through you. Mr. Nelson, I hear all the time about this small city to the north of us, about how fast they put permits through. And, you know, I'm hearing this, you know, 3 weeks thing, and it's frustrating, and there's a part of me that wants to say, you know, it's a very small city by comparison to something that is just so much more complex when you're in a big center like Nanaimo. But I'm just wondering, do you feel that it's a question of not enough staff or more or less risk adverse, we'll say, or the fact that we don't have target timelines? Is that possibly why?
Thank you through the chair. I think it's a combination of a bunch of different factors. I'm not sure that the building section requires more staff, frankly. I think that it's run well. I think that it has a good staff complement.
Yes.
I think development engineering needs some capacity, as I've mentioned, so there's that issue. I think that you've got a different type of development in Nanaimo, different pressures. A lot of your development now is infill, which takes more time to review, particularly from a servicing perspective, which adds to the time of the building.
Okay.
You've got more complex buildings than other smaller jurisdictions, so you've got all of those kinds of things. You frankly also probably have different expectations and council will be the judge of this better than I can be, but among your electors, among your residents, there's expectations that the city is ensuring that everything that goes into the public space is safe, is healthy, is so forth.
Okay.
Not that the smaller municipalities don't have the same obligations and expectations, but perhaps it's a little bit different when you see a lot of development happening in a small space.
Okay.
So we do have different approaches in different cities. Some of that is based on size, not always, but sometimes it is. I think, you know, we can if we look at the application if we look at building inspection, I mean, there are some jurisdictions, believe it or not, that don't have building inspection. There's still a requirement that everything meet the BC Building Code, but the jurisdiction, the authority having jurisdiction has decided that it's not interested in reviewing that. They tend to be very small rural places. There's a few of them in British Columbia. Other provinces, it's mandatory to have it, but cities could simply say, we're out of the game. Everybody must still conform to the BC Building Code, but it's not our problem. But I don't think that would be acceptable to most cities.
Okay, and just one quick final question. So, given all of the experience that you have and bring to the table, and thank you for the presentation today, it was excellent. I'm putting you on the spot here. What would you personally recommend as far as referral timelines? It would help us to know
Sure.
what that would be, because we hear one thing, we hear another. In your expertise?
The city has had some work done recently on the small-scale multi-use housing, and in that, there's a suggested timeline on what would be acceptable. And I'm going to look to Mr. Holmder just to jog my memory, but was it 4 weeks? I believe it was a 4-week turnaround for development engineering for that.
Wow, 4 week.
And that, which would be a big improvement as to what we've got in
Huge.
place. And I think that kind of, and actually, if we look at other cities like Kelowna, for example, which has a service agreement in place, it's a 4-week turnaround.
Wow.
And it is, they've taken the approach that if our comments aren't back in 4 weeks, we're proceeding without it. Not every city takes that approach. I'm not suggesting that for Nanaimo. I think that it's a collective endeavor in Nanaimo. We want to make sure our sections that are part of the process are working well together and focused on the same priorities. And I think the service agreement allows there to be clarity around what is our collective priority here and how are we going to work together to get this done.
Okay.
And in the case of Nanaimo's development engineering, how are we going to make sure we get the section built up with the capacity it needs to be able to really participate effectively in that.
Okay, well, it would certainly be aspirational, there's no doubt. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. I've got a few questions and some comments before we get to the delegations. First is just regard to the fast track program. I'm curious, like, how many total people have successfully utilized it, and in terms of the reasons why it's not being used. I was surprised to see that it's just not being used, and we actually, the staff that we had allocated to it are, working on other things, and just in terms of, the tenant improvements being sort of one of the, immediate economic development benefits that we could have getting people in their buildings. Any commentary on that?
I can start, Chair, and then perhaps Mr. Fox can comment as well. But My understanding is that a small percentage, relatively small percentage of applications have been successful through that program and being accepted and being deemed eligible. And the majority that have come into the system that have not been successful, it is largely because of what is deemed to be an incomplete application, different elements of the application missing. And that has required then the city, and this is very clear in the city's materials, to move it to a different stream. But perhaps Mr. Fox can fill in some of the more specifics there.
Yeah, through the chair to council. So the idea behind the fast track permitting and in consultation with industry was that we were going to have a very sort of strict compliance. And so that was going to help in processing these permits in a timely fashion, and that would help staff, and that would also help industry. So they would get their permit in 15 days, and we'd get a very complete application that we could just quickly go through and process and get out the door. The realities of what we see, though, are that we have very few applications that meet that criteria. And what was decided through setting up the process was that if the applications weren't complete, that they would be rejected and they would have to bring them back through the regular stream. So some people are very successful at it. They read through all the documentation, they understand, they follow the checklists, they fill out the building code analysis forms. All of that stuff was developed with industry as well. With great help from the architect and engineer that Jeremy was speaking of earlier. But the majority see it sort of as a fast process, but don't put the work in that's required to actually make it work. So expanding the program out, in my mind, when it's not actually meeting the criteria or we're not seeing the success, doesn't really make sense to me, because that work that comes through that fast track permitting, when it gets rejected, they have to reapply, and we have to go through all of the administrative work that was associated with setting up the folder in another process.
And just to follow up on that, I mean, like, I imagine that there's a large spectrum of sophistication in terms of people that are applying for the tenant improvement applications and skill level. A lot of the incomplete applications, are they things that were not really super difficult to know? Like if there was an AI program giving them, oh, you need to have this added or do this, would it reduce the amount of like questions that and answers that the staff would need to go through to make sure all the pieces are there? If there was a portal that kind of like gave people a heads up of what they were missing or not missing, and that, as opposed to just filling this out, reading the information, then sending it in, then having the staff look at it to see if it's complete or not, and then either rejecting or accepting it. A little bit of additional support would allow for a completer application. I'm just curious.
Yeah. So through the chair to council, a lot of the things that are missed are actually done by the professionals. So there's letters of assurance that have to be filled out appropriately, and we just find that they aren't being completed properly. So there's design criteria that's required on structural design drawings that isn't there and isn't submitted on the drawings.
Right.
So it's not just like the program set up more for the professionals, for sure. But with industry's help, we did create very detailed checklists for, so that we will get complete applications, and we even developed a separate building code analysis form that helps the applicant go through all of the different items that we'll be reviewing and make sure that they've considered them before they make their application. So I'm not really sure how we would expand on that or.
Right. Thank you. The gaps in ability. And the other comments that I just have, I think when we're just looking at from the earlier recommendations, what got implemented, what were still outstanding, even sort of with the implementation of the technology aspect of it, I think the tracking of who has what and being able to identify, when it's in the city's hands or external hands, that is the basis of being able to actually effectively implement timelines. But when I look at sort of the accountability framework on us to actually implement these items and when and by. It's like, 5 years gone by was a council motion to actually do a review of this. It's been another 6 months. I think, in going forward, I think in addition to these recommendations, and it's something, I'll discuss, we've had very little time turnaround from when we received the support to today, but we need to also, council has to, one, let us know, see if this is a priority and make sure that it's known that it's a priority, and then also have some accountability framework in terms of timelines around the implementation of the MEC recommendations, what additional resources could be needed if we wanted to speed that up, and then ultimately, once the technology is in place, putting in sort of the accountability framework on the timelines for all the different types of permitting processes, and I think that framework has been missing from the get-go.
Yeah, so if I could comment on that through the chair to council. I understand exactly what you're saying, and right now what we have is a report card, and the report card is ours and industries. So it's the day the application comes in, and it's the day the permit is issued. And for all kinds of different reasons, that can be quick or it can take a long time. The infrastructure that we have right now is, I don't carry 25, 30 years old for Tempest-ish. So we have a whole bunch of folders that are created for permitting that are inside that system. What was it, 2021 we started working with Clarity? And so we had this, we thought we were going to be moving to a new platform. We ended up not moving to that platform for various reasons, and this old system that we have in place, now it seems like the company that's bought it's going to support it into the future, so we've put some more resourcing into it. The e-apply system is basically all it does is bring the applications in. So it's a portal for people to submit their building permit applications. Those old folders that we have in there, in order to track the time from like who it's with and for how long, and is a task that's been assigned being completed in a timely manner, all of that requires a rework of that entire system and all of those folders, because you have to have an event in the folder for the Power BI to capture the data. So we don't have that. It's gonna take to the end of 2027 probably just to get the e-apply portion of it done. And then we have to go back into our system and redo all of the folders and put all of those tasks in and trigger points. And then we have to work on the Power BI side of it so that we can have meaningful data and meaningful timelines that show where this, where the work is, whether it's with the city or whether it's with the developer. I think that work is important, but also you have to remember that we're still dealing with the day-to-day work that we're trying to get done for the development community. So we're busy working on permit folders, and our capacity is somewhat limited. Obviously, timelines are long, and people are rightfully so, they want to get their permits issued. So the amount of time that we have to dedicate to getting this work done so that we can have this timely reporting isn't there.
Absolutely, no, and I appreciate it. And I think that's the question for Mr. Nielsen, is that in terms of accountability framework and actually like the strategic resourcing to, on top of staff that are already overburdened with just dealing with the work, are we properly resourced to actually deal with this in a timely manner? And do we need more strategic resourcing in terms of like the project management and like the staff that are implementing the changes that are needed and coordinating the changes that are needed? Because it seems like a lot of work, and when I look that it's been 5 years that we haven't done this sort of internal referral process, that there needs to be somebody to do that work, and it doesn't appear to me currently that we really have that without sort of overburdening our staff. So just if you had any comment on that, and it's something that we need to look at.
Sure, thank you, Chair. I think that the city has been challenged in different parts. I think that, as Mr. Fox mentioned, there's a lot going on. There's a lot being looked at. I think the technology is moving ahead. I think that that we look at the building section, and when we speak to IT and we look at the building section has stepped up to really become a recipient of some of that. I think that that's going to be a big change going forward once we start to apply some of that technology which is being introduced. I think that the big issue around resourcing is more on the development engineering side. I think if the city can really focus on looking at that, I think it's going to improve the overall building permit processing and allow for some changes. That in combination with the technology to allow some of the changes that Mr. Fox just mentioned to allow that to move forward. I think we've got a number, the way the section is structured now, we've got Mr. Fox who's there, who's able to project manage some of these things, and he's got very capable building officials there who can do some of the focus on the permits. So I don't think that it's impossible to start to implement some of these changes and start to achieve some of the results that are anticipated. I think that it's not going to be easy, but particularly around the staffing with development engineering. But I do think that in terms of resourcing, that's where your hole is going to be.
Great, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions, so yeah, maybe we'll get the delegations to.
I'm just looking at the time, I'm sorry to interrupt, and I just was wondering if you wanted to keep the delegations together and maybe do an early recess for 10 minutes now, and then get on with the delegations? Is that?
Okay. Yeah, let's do that.
The breath of autumn. I stand atop a hill on an early morn and hear
Okay, let's reconvene here. And we'll get into the delegations. And the first presenter that we have on the list is Jason Yoakum, Vancouver Island Real Estate Board. Good to see you, and the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Councillor Gesselbrecht, and other councillors and mayor. Most of you know me, Jason Yoakum. I'm the CEO with the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board. Not a developer, don't represent developers, but represent the real estate community, which is always concerned about the levels of inventory, especially when we have strong demand for this place, for this island, for this community, quality of life, etc. So I moved here about a little over 4 years ago, and always have seen a community with great potential. And there is a strong demand for people that want to relocate here from other places in Canada and beyond. But I also see a community that has gained a reputation of not being business friendly and not necessarily supportive of development. Developers and investors will move their money to wherever they see the greatest return, and we'd like that to be here. We need to be able to provide housing across the continuum that meets the demand that's there, not just the last-time home buyers, which typically move to the island for retirement. There's jobs that are opening for white-collar workers, especially in the health community with some of the things we see developing there. We also need those blue-collar workers in a place for them to live that support us in so many ways. Expediting the development and building permit approval process seems to be, to me at least, a solvable problem. I recognize that from the outside, solutions to a problem appear to be very simple, but when you're inside, sometimes they're not so simple. I appreciate that. I've heard about some of these issues with permit delays right from the time I first came here. To me, it appears that administration and council at times are very fine to pacify the development community with ongoing conversations and not demonstrating any measurable progress with that. From my perspective, I just struggle to understand why there's been a lack of significant progress during this whole time. In spite of many countless meetings, presentations, and reports, little progress seems to be made. I've always believed that if there is a will, that there is no problem that's not solvable, that money and technology can't take care of. Clearly, this is a solvable problem, as I've said, and it's been demonstrated, as we know, in many other cities and markets. There seems to be a lack of clear targets, as we've heard already this afternoon, and measurement and accountability for reaching the goals that we need to reach and the targets we need to. In my world, what I do for a living as CEO, if my membership's unhappy with some of the services, the technology, the products that we're providing, my board of directors will hear about it. They'll ask me for measurable solutions and a timeline for completion. They will then hold me accountable for those deadlines, and if I fail to meet those deadlines, they'll take any necessary steps to accomplish those desired outcomes for their members. They're not interested in excuses or reasons or having me look to them for the solutions. That's on me. I appreciate the frustration that I've seen in the development community. Permitting timelines are directly tied to housing supply and ultimately cost. Faster and more predictable approvals for developers will result in delivering needed housing at a lower cost. Quick delivery will also broaden the taxpayer base and bring forward revenue and taxes much earlier. In my opinion, a solution would require these things: clear leadership and direction from the mayor and council, prioritizing permitting performance, setting those measurable targets, requiring regular performance reporting, driving that accountability across many departments, and a focus on urgency through ongoing oversight. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the delegation? We have Director Perino. Oh, Mayor Krogh.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. We have all heard a great deal about this, some of us for the last 7.5 years, and so it's not necessarily a fair question, but in your position in dealing with the number of realtors you do up and down the island, so to speak, what's the community that should be the model, if you will? Or is there someone who's doing a better job, significantly better? And if so, can you tell us how and why they're doing better?
Anecdotally, I've heard of a couple communities, one north of us and one south of us, that have experienced a much better timeline turnaround for development permits. I don't know that it's always us to look to for those solutions. Again, internally, if it were in my association, my board would be looking to me and say, when can you have this completed? Regular reporting back to us and taking care of those issues. Sorry, I don't know a specific community that I can outline. Do you want me to name a couple that I've heard of? Parksville, Langford, Kelowna?
I'll settle for the heard ofs, even if you can point to somebody. I mean, that's, and I don't mean this in a critical way. Often everyone can point out the criticism of what exists in the city, whatever it may be, on whatever facet. But when you ask them for a solution or some example of where it's being done better or more smoothly, often I don't get an answer. It's not, again, not a criticism, but if there is some community, then yes, if it's Parksville, tell us, and if that's what you're hearing, even that is helpful from our perspective. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy Witcher of Vancouver Island Construction Association.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. So VICA supports responsible growth, infrastructure investment, and housing delivery. We recognize the city must plan for growth and to fund infrastructure that supports it. However, this afternoon I'd like to focus on something equally important, and that's how Nanaimo can improve the permitting and approvals process so projects can move faster with more certainty and with better outcomes for everybody. So the industry's message is very clear. The biggest barrier today is not just cost, but it's time, uncertainty, and delays. When projects sit in the approval system too long, costs rise automatically through carrying costs, financing pressure, redesigns, and inflation. Delays become an invisible tax on housing and business investment. We understand staff have been working hard under difficult conditions, but we also understand staffing constraints remain the primary challenge. We've heard that some departments are operating at roughly half capacity. Recruitment and retention are difficult due to retirements, housing affordability, competition from other jurisdictions, and lengthy certification requirements. That means the solution is not blame, the solution is process reform, better resourcing, and collaboration. So I just have a couple points that the industry feels could help. One being to establish service standards, and I know we've heard a lot of my comments from the report that was done, so I'm encouraged to, so you might hear some repeats here. So establish service standards, set clear review timelines for complete applications, and publicly report performance. Improve communication and transparency. Applicants need regular status updates, visibility into referral timelines, and clarity on where their files have stalled. Third one, to create one point of contact to assign a single project lead for each application, and in particular in the bigger projects. Instead of navigating multiple departments separately, applicants should just have one accountable contact coordinating internal reviews. Number 4, to fix the bottlenecks, current delays tied to referrals, civil review processes, and duplicate review steps should be audited. 5th one, reward complete applications, and incomplete applications do create delays, and the industry accepts that. Number 6 is to expand fast-track tools. So programs such as the Certified Professional Streams, tenant improvement fast-tracking, and priority processing for rental or workforce housing should be expanded. So I just wanted to say that, you know, if Nanaimo wants more housing, more investment, and more jobs, then permit efficiency is growth policy. Every month saved in approvals helps lower costs, improves feasibility, and accelerates delivery. On charges and fees, we urge caution. In our fragile economy, any added cost should be phased in, predictable, and balanced against the real need to keep projects moving. We also believe that the city should pause any new charges until the economic conditions improve. So a simple message, let's make Nanaimo the city known for certainty, collaboration, and timely approvals. That reputation alone would attract investment faster than any incentive program. And I would just encourage, from the report, lots of things, like I said, I've repeated in mine, but I encourage that the industry is brought along and consulted with what's going on with changes. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And any questions here from council? Mayor Krogh?
Thank you very much. And just to confirm, you support the recommendations that Mr. Nielsen has made in his comments. Is that fair to say, the 5 recommendations?
Yeah, I had, about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Hammonds? Oh, I think we got a few more questions here for you, Ms. Witcher. No worries.
You inspired a lot of questions. Thank you for coming and presenting. My question is actually the same as the mayor's. You provided some great information. What did you think of the recommendations in the report? Do you think that we're on the right track to realize the results that you're looking at us to achieve?
Yeah, I didn't include the AI in my report, but listening to what was said about that is very encouraging. The professional certification is also a great idea. Also, I did hear about the having the one person that leads the project along.
Okay, thank you. So safe to say you support the recommendations and the direction we're heading in?
Sorry?
Sorry, it's safe to say that you support the recommendations provided and the direction that we're headed in if we adopt them?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair. My question is actually more for staff. So I'm interested in this navigator, I would call it, process where somebody is responsible for helping a developer get through the process. And I'd heard from somebody who had a project in town, in the downtown core, and they were told on staff that they had to do this, and then afterwards that they had to do something else, and they jumped through a few hoops over a year and eventually just abandoned the process because they hadn't got clear information all the way around, and it wasn't it just didn't end up being feasible for them. And so I'm curious with staff, is this a navigator helping a developer through a project? Is that something that is feasible from a staff perspective?
Through the chair to Councillor Manley, I guess I'd say there's so many different paths that projects could take. There are, depending on the process involved, the scale of the project and the processes involved, there are file managers that see projects through from start to finish, depending on the scale of the project. But some projects, I mean, if it's a simple building permit application with no development permit, there's a building official that oversees the file, manages it from application to occupancy and then completion. And then, yeah, if there's a rezoning application, say, that then becomes a development permit application and then onto a building permit application, as long as there's continuity in the staff person, which sometimes changes over time, but that, like, the planner would typically follow that application through from rezoning, development permit, and then they do they're not doing the building permit review, but they're doing the plan check, the development permit compliance check, and following the complex application with rezoning, development permit, building permit through from application through to completion. So essentially we do have, depending on the process, but there's no, we do have that type of role. The planners typically fill those roles on a complex project. But we don't have like a designated navigator position.
Okay.
And there's many different paths that projects can take, I guess, is part of the challenge there. So.
And just to be clear, like this, the situation I was talking about was a change of use for a building, and I think that probably the business person involved didn't understand all of the different questions they needed to ask in the process. You know, like, this is what I'm trying to do, and so I'm wondering about how, you know, if there's a way to clarify with people that if this is what their intended use is going to be, that they would have, you know, these different steps, because it sounded like they were kind of going through one hoop and then another hoop, and then eventually realizing that it wasn't going to work for the situation that they had. So if the building's in use for something else now, and the owner is happy that it's being used, but that wasn't what they had bought the building for.
Yeah, through the chair to, in that case, there would be a building official would be the correct contact, but there would also be, on the applicant side, there would be a coordinating registered professional involved, and, well, an architect involved at least. Yeah. Possibly not a coordinating registered professional, but an architect that would assist them in the change of use as well. So sometimes it's getting the correct professional involved is the key. So there are professional resources that applicants can externally that can guide business owners, because I understand the challenge that business owners face in their passion and their drive is the business and not necessarily the
process to get there.
Yeah, the process to get there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
We've got still a few more questions here for you. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure that I've got this straight. You used the term service standards. Are you talking about the internal service requirements or agreements? Sorry, is that what you're talking about? Okay. And the other thing too is, you know, you're with the Vancouver Island Construction Association. That's the entire island. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Is there anywhere that's exemplary that you see that you just go, wow, that's what we need here in Nanaimo? Come on.
You know, every municipality is so different.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to pinpoint a particular other region or municipality that does well. I think really just being able to be collaborative with the industry and find out what works for both sides is going to work for any municipality that you're in. So it's just working together because we're really, striving for the same end goal.
That's right.
So
That's
yeah,
right.
just having a collaborative approach with the industry, I think, is your best bet.
Okay, because, we talked about this 4-week issue, right? That's assuming the application is flawless,
Yeah.
right? And ready to go. And in your interpretation, that would definitely be a move forward, is that correct? Because I'd like to put that forward as a council, but I want to make sure that we don't put staff in a position where it becomes an impossible goal.
Yes, yeah, no, yes, it would be, and maybe it's more education for the industry, maybe a better, outline of what needs to be included, and that might already be the case, but yes, for the industry, if they were to fill out the applications fully, then it would
That would help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Eastmer.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation or your delegation. I heard that you recommended pausing new fees or increases until conditions improve, pardon me. So I totally appreciate why you recommend that, but practically, like, what benchmark or measurement or number would we be looking for to be able to say that conditions have improved enough?
Yeah, that's also a tough one, but it is a tough time for the industry right now for so many different reasons that it's hard to pencil out jobs now. And then, of course, with everything that's going on globally, it's making it even more difficult. So I don't know the exact benchmark, but the industry would be able to tell you whether or not it's on the upswing again or not. But yeah, it's a tough time. It's a tough time for everybody, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the optimism of thinking that when things improve, then it can we can bring in those fees and charges. But yeah, it's a delicate balance. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Seeing no other questions, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
And now Carrie Ann Cody, Canadian Home Builders Association.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I do have a presentation. I'm not sure if it's up. If it's not there, I can just speak anyways. There it is. Perfect. So while that's loading, I am Carrie Ann Cody. I am the CEO for the Canadian Home Builders Association of Vancouver Island. So thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing me to be here today. There we go. I want to start off by saying this is about a partnership, and that is why the recently formed group has the word partnership in the title. Because for nearly a decade that I've held this role, I've been part of ongoing conversations with the city, as well as industry, about improving the permit process. We've sat at tables together, participated in working groups, contributed to reviews, and shared ideas, all with the same objective: to make the system more efficient and more predictable. It's not a new conversation. And that context matters as we look at where we are today. While we've been having these conversations, the cost of waiting has continued to grow. And that cost isn't theoretical. It shows up in delayed housing starts, projects have become financially unviable, and uncertainty that discourages investment. Every delay compounds over time. And ultimately, those impacts are felt by the people trying to access housing in this community. Permits are the gatekeeper to housing and growth. Sorry, went too far there. They determine when a project can move forward or when it sits idle. So when timelines extend, carrying costs increase month over month, supply is delayed from entering the market, and affordability pressures intensify. This is one of the most direct levers we have in influencing housing outcomes, and right now it's not performing as well as it needs to. In 2021, there was a clear set of recommendations: reduce processing times, improve collaboration, modernize systems. Those were the right priorities then, and they're still the right priorities now. So today the question isn't whether we know what the issues are. The question is, after 5 years, have we actually achieved meaningful improvement? And the big reality, the report gives us a very honest answer. It tells us it's not clear that the turnaround times have improved. The current system does not produce meaningful data, and timelines have largely remained unchanged. So despite years of effort, we got our slides in the wrong order. So despite years of effort, we cannot confidently say that the system is performing better today than it was in 2021. It's not a reflection of a lack of effort, it's a reflection of a system that hasn't been set to measure and demonstrate improvement. The data gap, a key component here, and this is the core issue. Right now, the city is only tracking application received to permit issued. That means we cannot isolate how much time is spent within the city versus how much is time spent with the applicant. We don't know where the delays are actually occurring so that we can improve them. There's no true performance tracking system. There's no chess clock, as we've heard already today, that stops and starts based on responsibility. And the reality is simple. What we don't measure, we don't improve. Until we have that set level of visibility, we're relying on assumptions instead of data. What the report and industry experience are both telling us is that the delays are increasing in the most complex part of the process, particularly referrals and coordination. Those delays are being driven by staffing capacity challenges and internal coordination gaps. Those costs don't stay with the builder, they get passed on to the end user. So the delay in the process directly translates into higher housing costs in the community. I'm awesome at putting slides in order today. I'll just speak quickly to the accountability. So without those service agreements that we've heard already, we don't have accountability. It was recommended in 2021 and it's still not implemented. The inconsistent timelines make it very difficult for industry to predict. Without the ability to predict, it's very difficult to bring projects online. Back to that cost of waiting though, the carrying costs per month are what we're really hoping to achieve. When we were here not very long ago talking about the impact of development cost charges, we know that we need to find that money somehow so that it doesn't affect housing affordability. And this is the easiest way to do it. If we can condense those permit timelines and reduce the carrying costs, we can end up with a net neutral increase to housing, and that's our biggest ask of government right now. We're seeing units being lost. We're seeing, unfortunately, we're seeing delayed starts, units lost, and we are in a layoff position for a lot of our members across Vancouver Island, especially here in Nanaimo. Quickly, just to show, when we were talking a little bit about comparison, in 2024, the Canadian Home Builders Association nationally ran a benchmarking study. Nanaimo is not included in the study because Nanaimo didn't have the data publicly available, nor could they get it at Altus Group. It sounds like attempted and couldn't get the data that they needed. We didn't have the right data set. So just to show Kelowna, so for their approval timeline, they're roughly around 5.8 months in 2024. For a low-rise building, what this means is just over $4,000 per unit per month in carrying costs. For Kamloops is 6.9 months. I just wanted to draw a little bit of a comparison in that the application timeline does impact housing affordability. These are numbers that do directly affect that. The other piece is Kelowna has just reduced their DCCs by 25% in order to help get some housing affordability back within the last 2 weeks. So incremental change just isn't enough at this point. We need to see that fast track. We need the technology to catch up. We've talked about the AI presentation that you received at AVIC this weekend. I've had the chance to pilot that system. It's interesting. There's still a lot of work I think that needs to be done there. But technology is going to be a big assistance in helping us get online and getting our timelines reduced. So in conclusion, I support all 5 of the recommendations set out in the report. I believe that the path forward is very clear. If we implement real tracking, a true chess clock, define accountability through service agreements, invest in systems that allow us to measure performance, and create a structure that actually drives continuous improvement, because if we don't measure it, we won't improve it, and Nanaimo can't afford to continue to wait. That's all.
Great, thank you so much. And we have a bunch of questions for you, starting with Councillor Eastmere. Is that a question, or you carry over there? Okay. Mayor Krogh.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, and thank you to you and to the others who've been very patient this afternoon. I do get complaints on individual projects from time to time, and my general experience is that I get a report back from staff, and it indicates that the delays involved often relate to incomplete applications or whatever, that there's always two sides to every story. I've jokingly said to all of my fellow councillors over the years, what I learned about the practice of law was never believe anything the other side says and only half of what your own client tells you. Having said that, I was very interested in the point you were making around, firstly, not having enough data, but secondly, that just looking at the time between the application and the issuance of the permit doesn't tell us who's responsible for what, and that would be seen as useful information, I take from your point, yes?
I absolutely agree with that statement. I think that for us as well as industry, it's important for us to know where we're not missing the mark. So if it's gaps in not submitting something that they erroneously thought that they submitted, that's where the technology comes in and does that plan check of you're mixing X, Y. But then from the flip side of that, it also gives us most common errors, and that's actually something Jeremy and I have discussed about doing some industry education on the most common errors that we're seeing in applications so that we can kind of go at the problem this way. So if we're seeing incomplete applications, let's fix that. But on the flip side, we need the permit processing time to be quicker too.
And if I may, just thank you very much for your assistance and cooperation in all of this, all the associations and the parties involved here today. It's useful if we can continue to talk together and try and improve the process, because quite candidly, council doesn't take any joy in receiving complaints about comparisons to other communities and the delays involved, and I think it's fair to say that most of us are pretty conscious of what it means every month, and God bless the Canadian banking system, solid as it is, but it's costing a great deal of money, and it simply either makes projects unprofitable so they don't get built, or alternatively, people who are attempting to create projects build them and go belly up, and it's not healthy for anybody, so thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mayor, and next is Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Chair. It was disappointing to read that we didn't have the complete data set to be a comparator community for Kelowna and Kamloops. I'm curious, Ms. Cody, Kelowna had 5.8 months and Kamloops had 6.9 months in their timelines. Would those be targets that you would like to see? Are they on track?
I would say they're still a little high, but they fell, because this was a report for across the country, I would say they fell middle to top.
Middle to top. Okay. It seems to me that we're really, that tech piece is going to be really important, because I also attended that demonstration of AI on the Nanaimo pilot, and it was really interesting to see, just like you suggested, in the report, we had 2 out of 9 applications were not ready to be reviewed by staff. So not only does the AI model help people figure out what they need, but it also helps developers figure out what they're missing. So like it was this little tick mark, oh, you're missing this checklist. And I know that we have those comprehensive checklists that have been developed, but it just seems like that tech is going to be a really helpful piece for actually measuring what we say we're going to try to do here, which I thank you for bringing up that important point. If we can't measure it, we can't evaluate it. And all of this is just big words. So thank you, that's a really important piece.
Great. And Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair. And I was actually trying, Councillor Hemmons, I was trying to remember the name of that program. I can't remember it. It'll come to me.
The one from AVIC?
What is it?
The one from AVIC?
Yes.
I don't know the name of it. I believe it's like Mason or something, but it's developed by Alpha Strategies.
Yes, I think it was Mason. Yeah, I think it was Mason. Good. I won't sleep tonight because I just wanted to. Yeah, that's right, solved. I just wanted to question you. You said that Kelowna put in a DCC increase. Is that correct?
Decrease.
A decrease.
Yeah. So they were set to increase, and then there was a lot of conversation because Kelowna's hurting.
Yes.
So I want to say it was about 2 weeks ago. They have announced that they're decreasing their DCCs for by 25%, and I think for a year, potentially 2.
And on all developments? Isn't that interesting? Thank you. Appreciate that.
Great. Seeing any more questions? Thank you. I do have a question for staff here. Yeah, I don't think there's any more questions for you. Thank you so much. That was great. Just around the software implementation that we're working on, what specifically are the different programs that we're trying to implement? Like, you see the reference to Power BI, and is that sort of the dashboard that is sort of forward-facing for the actual permitting tracking that we seem to be talking about, that allows for that, what do you call it, the chess clock ability to narrow in whose side the court the ball's in?
So through the chair to you, Councillor Gesselbrecht, yes, that's the very short answer to it. As Mr. Nielsen referred to, Power BI is, and as Darcy referred to, Power BI is a tool that can go into the existing systems, pull the information out so that it becomes visible to not only everyone in council and the management and staff, but then to the public as well, to get a sense in terms of where an application is, and in essence provide a bit of that virtual chess clock. The timing on that is probably not within the next 6 months, and the reason for that is just existing priorities that we're working on. So in addition to doing e-apply applications, it's also making sure that we're keeping the lights on. So in terms of finding the time to build that power, to build that dashboard, we're looking at probably the second half of this year, just to start doing the design and then start working on the configuration of it. So the timing of it could be a little bit, well, perhaps in 2027.
Okay, and is that really the only sort of software that needs to be implemented? Or, you know, I think there's discussion about folders and being able, like all those aspects, like what other things that need to get done to implement that?
So it's not even so much, through the chair to you, Councillor Gesselbrecht, it's not so much about implementing it, it's about, we already have the tools. It's getting the individuals to have the time, to maybe bring in some contractors who have expertise in order to help us identify where within the existing system, where within the folders that we can start grabbing that information, design the tool so that it can be pulled out and displayed to staff, to management, and to the public. So this is not an investment in software, more an investment in perhaps contractors, architects, and just staff time to figure out how to use existing tools, how to find the data, and then how to present the data so it's usable, not only to staff, but then to the public.
Okay, and just, so in the overall portal that's created, you know, the ability to, when you're uploading all your documents in for the application submission, you know, each of those documents or whatever that needs to be reviewed and who's reviewing, and if there's other things that are required, is that all part of that software and tracking system? Is that, or is that a sort of separate entity?
Through the chair too.
And I guess too, on top of that, I guess we were pursuing another, like, it was a couple years ago where there was, we were trying to put a program in place for the application that would do tracking, and that that group wasn't able to fulfill their contract, and we abandoned that. Are we looking at a comprehensive integrated system like that, or now are we going on another track and trying to use what we currently have and then bringing this Power BI? I guess sort of like the strategic decision of what type of system we're implementing. I need a little bit of clarity on that.
So through the chair, it's more the latter of what our current approach is to use the existing tools we have, identify other services and systems, Power BI, for example, AI tools that can help complement the overall usability of the system. So at present time, we're not looking to replace the existing tool. We tried that a couple years ago, and unfortunately, it didn't go as how we anticipated it. So the strategy currently, and has been for the last 2 years, is how do we find new services that can complement or have been made by the existing vendor, so that the overall tool has greater usability and provides greater information and data for the end users. E-Apply is exactly one of those modules. So when we were investigating the Clarity product, eApply wasn't available. And it's since been available, and as such, we've created that online portal where developers and can submit their permit applications through that portal. Now, eApply, there's still quite a few permits that we need to put in place, so that it becomes a bit more of a fulsome service, so that there's more application types that can be submitted online versus needing to go paper-based and coming into the office. In terms of investigating for a new system, I would suggest that this is currently not on our immediate radar, but it's something that we'd want to take a look at in 2028, 2029. And the reason why I suggest that is because I would suggest there's not, we'd want to look at what is available in the marketplace, and could it truly address the requirements that we have. Although our system is older, 25 to 30 years old, it is comprehensive, and it does take into account all the various processes and permit types that we have within the city, as well as there's integration to other systems such as our GIS as well as our financial tools that are exceptionally hard to replace with another monolith system. So to answer your question as a summary is that we're looking at ways to complement the existing tools which are in place in our end-to-end processes with new services, whether it's through Power BI to make a report dashboard available for the public and staff, looking at other tools that are either new or are relatively new, such as AI or eApply, et cetera, and how it can complement that existing process so that we do have an overall better tools for public and the staff to use, and ideally to speed up the overall permanent approval times.
There was a strategic decision then to not try to redo the system and go with improving our tools. And I guess, like, are we putting off, though, the eventuality of having, like, given the complexity of the permitting process and what needs to be coordinated, are we putting off having to redo that anyways and have like a portal that everybody can put their information into, that'll track all the software, you know, be able to have AI tools for responding to different questions, inevitably in 2 years? Or is this what we need to be doing right now, and it'll get us to meet all those objectives of what we're hoping to in terms of tracking our permits and being able to have like a lot more clarity on where the bottlenecks are and who's responsible for what? I guess my concern, are we, by this current approach on the software, are we putting off what we're going to have to do anyhow, or what we're doing now will meet those objectives?
Through the chair, the approach we're taking now is how to find digital improvements that are going to be required to increase the overall ease of use of the tools. I think we're on the right track in terms of finding the new products that are in place that may not have been in place a few years ago to make the system a bit more, well, user-friendly, to say the very least. I also suggest too that if we were to do an upright replacement, as we've already tried, that is a significant investment, not only just in funding, but in time. I would suggest that for us to find a new tool, it will take us probably anywhere from a year to 18 months to figure out what that tool is and go through the proper procurement, and then another few years to do that replacement. We're also in the process of finalizing our existing financial system, the ERP. I would suggest that we want to be a bit more mature with that before we start looking at a new tool that will have to integrate directly to it, because as we know that it definitely is a revenue product that would need to feed directly into our finance system. So to answer your question, is that we are looking at how do we improve the existing systems, but I would also suggest to Mr. Nielsen's report is what other concepts are we considering, processes, for example, service levels, for example, that are going to be complemented by the digital tools so that we can increase the overall throughput and usability of the permanent approval system.
Okay, thank you. We've got a few questions here. Councillor Brown?
And Chair, just a reminder, you have one more delegation as well.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just in follow-up to your questions there, having a little bit of trouble following the bouncing ball with respect to the order of operations, because Power BI is simply just, when we're talking about that, we're talking about Microsoft's business intelligence software, correct? Okay. previously, when we had talked about measurements and permitting times, it was stated we needed to update our software and go to a new system. But what I'm hearing now is we could use Power BI to do some of that, and we're building it on the Tempest system, which is the same system we've been using for 30 years. Okay, so I'm just curious, the council dashboard, is that Power BI for the decision making?
Through the chair to you, Councillor Brown, it would be the main tool that we use to develop that dashboard.
Right, so the council dashboard for voting records, is that Power BI?
It would be the key tool to use it, yeah, to provide that tool for you. Yeah.
So like, I guess my question here then is, like, I think that was 2020 or 2021. Why weren't we exploring Power BI for measuring within Tempest?
Through the chair to you, Councillor Brown, I would have to get back to you in terms of the answer to that.
Okay, thanks.
Director Hall? Sure, thank you, through the chair to Councillor Brown's question too. Just to clarify, so using Power BI, which I'm not going to claim to understand, but my colleague here understands very well, and I'm sure Councillor Brown, it sounds like you do as well, but integrating that with the existing, we use Tempest. Prospero is our primary Tempest module or application that we use to process development approvals applications. And so there is an integration there, but we also need to, there's a bunch of configuration, I think Mr. Fox spoke to earlier, that has to happen to the existing structure, to the existing functionality in Tempest to fully take advantage of Power BI. So there's more work to be done that's going to take time and energy to adjust and to make sure that we dial that in correctly, and we've done some work with that on others that are using that tool to understand what we have to do. We need to do a deeper dive into that, but there'd be a significant amount of configuration work that would have to happen in Prospero to fully take advantage of Power BI and use it to develop the dashboard that we've been discussing. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and just curious, when was that integration available from Prospero?
Sorry, maybe I'll add to the context too. At the time that we were discussing previously and replacing Prospero with and it's a major lift, and we can't let it fail to shift from Prospero to another system. We looked at that. At the time we were making that move, the company behind Prospero was signaling that they weren't going to continue investments in it.
Okay.
That context has changed too. There's a lot of context that's changed behind the scenes as well. So we've got the support, the recognition that there's going to be continued investments in Prospero, and then also the work done to identify how we can use tools like Power BI, reconfigure Prospero to achieve some of the outcomes that we originally expected through investments in the new, in a separate standalone platform. So that's the I guess the pivot that we took on that.
Okay, thank you for that.
Great. Thanks for the response there. And yeah, we'll go into our last delegate, Carl Binder from the Mid-Island Business Initiative. And our apologies for going down the rabbit hole there on the software. And I know you probably got to get back to work, so it's all yours.
Lots of things to develop. Only get 3 minutes? Okay. Oh, understood. Yes, good afternoon, Chair, Councilors, Mayor. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Carl Binder. I'm speaking on behalf of MIBI. You might remember me from the DCC's discussion. For some reason, I keep drawing the short straw. The conversation today has been great, honestly. Thank you very much. Appreciate the update from the Nielsen report. Love the recommendations. All my slides basically cover the recommendations with some caveats. But first, I do want to mention, this committee requested an update to this report on May 12th, 2025. That was 1 year ago. We don't have time. We keep talking about the time. The timeline for permits, the applications, we keep talking and talking and talking. We need action. So I'm really hoping these recommendations will move forward fast. And so the very first thing with the decoupling, the design stage acceptance, yes, I think this is a great long-term solution, but it doesn't help the applications that are in stream right now. The report deals with building permit applications. We have a real problem with our development permits and our rezoning. Development permits, I brought this example up at the last delegation. I have a development permit in that was applied for October 14th. I still have not received the comprehensive letter. It's taking us 8 months just to get a comprehensive letter. So we talk about that chess clock. Well, guess what? October 14th, boom. It's still running, still with the city. There's no back and forth. I keep getting updates from staff, and this is planning, saying it's with referrals. It's with referrals. So we do know that that's an issue. We support decoupling the DSA, but entirely. Right now, the recommendation is to obtain the DSA at the development permit stage. I don't think it's a great idea to couple it with the development permit, and I have had discussions with Jeremy, and I don't think that was the intention, but I would like to make sure that that is either amended or we all understand that, yes, it's a separate thing altogether. Because if we couple it with the development permit, I can see that now just getting delayed even further. And it's still taking us 8 months to get a comprehensive letter. So how much longer is that going to take now? So the development engineering. Right now, the recommendation is to add 1 staff member, but we're going down 50% by Friday. And we already had, this was the bottleneck. With respect, I don't think 1 is enough. I really don't. And when we talk about fees, we're happy to pay additional fees. I know it was mentioned in the report, hey, building permit fees might have to go up a bit. That is nothing compared to our carrying costs. Happy to pay more. If it means we can get a permit in less than 6 months, starting with rezoning or development, I really think we need to look at staffing up, especially in the development engineering. Right now, like the market is depressed, and the way that I look at my staff, if I've got work coming up, I'll put an ad out right now and I get about, I don't know, 50 applicants within the first week. And some with a lot of good talent. So I'm not sure. I understand there's collective bargaining agreements. We're working with unions. We got to figure out how to fill these positions. The accountability on referrals, this obviously is probably the biggest thing. We've talked about this backlog. We've talked about the bottleneck. It's a scapegoat right now. Every time we follow up, and I mentioned this at the DCC's discussion, hey, we're waiting on referrals. So whether that's the cooperation in between different departments, or they're just not sure when it's coming over to their department, or if it's just development engineering. And if that's the case, again, I go back to the last slide. Let's get more than just 1 then. Let's go 3, 4, whatever it takes. The internal service agreements, I think, is super important, but honestly, they're going to need to be enforced. And if we say, no, you know what, here's the timeline. 4 weeks is what we're thinking. What happens when it takes 8 weeks, 12 weeks? Are there any ramifications? I think something has to be written in there. People have to be accountable, but they can only be accountable if there's penalty clauses or something. Like, I write a contract, I say I'm going to be done the schedule by a specific date. I don't make that date. There are penalty clauses. Those are my ramifications. I have to pay. So what are the ramifications with an internal service agreement? I think risk tolerance is a big thing. Yes, we're meeting with the development delivery partnership, and that's something that we can talk a little bit further about. I know that with the fast track permit, with the CP program, yeah, the question is, what is a complete application? And there's no way that this industry is asking for risking life and safety matters, but I think when it comes to the spirit of cooperation, if a letter of assurance was missing, or if it just came down to the fire suppression system on an existing system, and all there is a few heads that have to change, like, is that life safety? I guess you could argue that, but that's the risk tolerance. That's where I think we've got to align ourselves and collaborate more. One would also argue that when we start construction, there's so many eyes on this. The building inspectors come out, they catch things, even things that might not have been caught through the application process, but through the inspection, guess what? They're gonna catch it. They come and they look at it before we cover up the walls. So I like to think that there's risk management in just that alone. Not to mention my trades understand these things as well. There's a building system synthesis that has to happen. So as the trades are coming and they're trying to build the building, they go through the whole submittals process. They go through RFIs and everything that might be missing. So it's not just the city's eyes that are on it. It's not just staff. It's not just my architect, engineers. It's actually the people that are building it too. There's a whole system of risk management. And then finally, the CP program. Yes, I think it's been difficult. There's a lot to go through. 9 applications over the 2+ years, I think we all understand. It was going to be a slow intake to start. Only 2 cases satisfied the program, though. That's unfortunate, and I would really like to see the audit. I think it's very important to understand how much time it did save. Is it worth developers paying this extra money to go through this process to save a month? Probably not. But if it cut the time in half, probably. So definitely worth auditing and understanding what those time savings are. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Tyler, is it Councilor Brown? Have any questions for Mr. Binder? Mayor Krogh.
Thank you very much. And this is well, I'll call it a joint question, both to Mr. Holm or Mr. Nielsen and Mr. Binder. To go back to the 9 applications over 2 years and only 2 satisfied the program, what's your individual perspectives on why that hasn't worked the way one might have hoped? Horrible question, forgive me, but that's the job.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll maybe ask Mr. Fox just to kind of briefly comment on some of the trends that we've seen in that.
Yeah, I would say it's like any profession. There's people that are highly skilled and trained, and then there's the rest of us. And when we have a good CP or a good CRP or architect, we sort of have the same application. So regardless of what stream it's in, we could have good timelines. So we're paying we're having an additional layer of oversight on the project with the CP program, which could work, but you have to find that individual that's at the top of their game to make it work. So what we've noticed, I mentioned earlier, we had a project that was where we had the fire department access, which is a critical piece, and it's one of the first things that you should look at. So, you need to be within no closer than 3 meters, no farther than 15, and yet the application came in through the CP program at 28 meters. So professional reliance is fine, but as I was advised when we implemented the CP program by AIBC, continue on with your reviews and with your checks as you normally would. The speed that you're going to gain potentially is that the application comes in and is properly coordinated and complete. And in the two cases that it did, and it was a success, that was the case. There's always little minor things that you have to have a chat about, but for the most part, there wasn't much to talk about in those two instances. So it sort of feels like there was another layer of, like we already have the requirement for a coordinated registered professional overlooking all the other professionals' work, called a CRP. It's typically the architect. And now there's an additional layer, again, with the CP, but it's only as good as the individual that's doing the work. It's just how it is. I want to add a little, maybe if I could take a little bit of your time and just make the comment that at the end of the day, you know, we can implement all of this technology. We can point fingers at one another to say it's taking them too long, it's taking us too long. We can put all of that effort into the technology to find out who is the one that's responsible for the timelines, or we could just hire the people and do the work. And I think that's what we need to do. We're focusing a bunch of energy on going back into these existing folders, reconfiguring them, figuring out how we're going to run this chess clock so that we can say whose fault it is. And at the end of the day, what we need to do is figure out how to get the work done. And at the end of the day, I don't think it's AI. I think it's people. So, you know, I would tend to agree with this fellow here, and I just say that we could do some of these things with technology, but we first have to resource ourselves appropriately so that we can get the day-to-day business work done, and then these nice-to-have projects can get completed as well. But they're not the thing that's going to move the needle here, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Could I add to that?
It was a joint
Okay, so just to add to,
question, so I'd like to hear from all three, please.
yeah, and I would agree. Quite often, how much time is spent pointing fingers, and how much time, like, I'll just use Mountain Equipment Company as an example. So Mountain Equipment Company was applied for through the fast track permit application. That was in August. It wasn't applied through by me, it was applied through by the architect, and the architect assured me I've had a discussion with the building inspector, Mr. Ruthven, and we're good. Over the counter, I should have this within the 15 days. The 15 days pass. Unfortunately, Mr. Ruthven's on vacation. The architect is calling, saying, what's going on? How come I don't have my permit? Well, now Mr. Fox has to get involved, Mr. Holm has to get involved, Dale's got to get involved. Then, of course, the CEO of MEC is emailing Mayor and Council. Yeah. It's taking up so much time, everyone's time, when we could have just been focusing on getting the permit out. And maybe that's where technology comes in and helps to answer some of the applications that were potentially wrong. I don't know how long that will take, but obviously there was a miscommunication, or maybe it was just because it was verbal and over the counter, and Mr. Ruthven had said something, or the architect heard something, but that has to stop. And that's where we tried to come up with the checklist and say, here you go. Again, when it comes down to it, like, you got to look in the file now, and Mr. Fox is saying, well, you don't have your letter of assurance for the fire suppression, and you know, the fire suppression, even though it's an existing building, well, how much risk is with that existing building and the fire suppression? Could we not continue on in that stream? No, cancel. Okay, where's the spirit of collaboration then? There was no cooperation, there was no collaboration, and unfortunately, the permit does not get finalized. So anyways, I think that's where I'm coming with it, is collaboration and cooperation, and yes, maybe more people, removing the bottlenecks is the answer.
Great, thank you. Is that it?
Chair, I did say it was a joint question to Mr. Holm and/or Mr. Fox, Mr. Nielsen, Mr. Binder, so I'd like to hear their three perspectives, if I may.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the chair. So just to clarify too, that the 9 applications, the 9 permits, they were issued. It's just that 7 of them probably didn't meet the expectation of what should be reviewed and approved efficiently through the CP program. The other 2 did. So just to clarify that. So yeah, and there were a variety of, Mr. Fox touched on a couple of issues that we ran into in other instances. 2 incidents, for instance, they applied actually as permits for modular construction projects, and then they switched partway through to conventional stick-built projects. So they completely changed the design of the project midway through the application, which it doesn't obviously help with the review and efficiency, and they shouldn't have come in that way in the first place. But in any event, we worked through that. But just to flag that, you know, the 9 were actually issued, but 7 took longer than they should have, and were not taking full advantage of the efficiencies that could be realized in the program for various reasons. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Nielsen.
Thank you, Chair, and through to the mayor and his question. In my view, there are perhaps 3 reasons why it hasn't kind of landed the way that had been hoped. And although my overarching statement is I think that it's still a good investment, I think it's still something the city should be pursuing. One is it's new, and so with any new program like this, it's going to take some time. We've got staff who is relatively new for staff. They're understanding what it means to work through that process. We've got some new CPs as well, certified professionals, who are learning how to work through the process for Nanaimo. It is a different process. There's lots of other requirements in place. There's lots of expectations in place we've heard about from staff. The second, I think, is yes, there are issues around submitting complete applications. We've heard about some of that, both from staff and from industry. I looked at 2 of the files myself and looked at the review letters that had gone out and realized that, okay, some things were missed in these things and they were important things. And so that's going to create some difficulty. So that's definitely a factor. And the third is I think that the CPs, they'll deal with the building permit side of it, the building code side of it, but they don't deal with the civil servicing. And so we're still dependent on referrals, and so we're still bumping up against the referrals issue. So we've got that complicating factor. Deal with that, allow the project to allow the process, I think, the program to continue to mature a little bit, keep working on the completeness of applications, and I do think that this is a program the city doesn't want to abandon. I think there is some merit in keeping it.
Great, thank you. Done? Councilor Perino.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick question through to you, Mr. Binder, and thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. We need to know the truth, right? So it's good. I'm just wondering if you feel that we should be hiring contractors or outsourcing some of the work. Would that be a better solution than just bringing people in? Is it just a backlog problem, or is it something that's just your thoughts?
I feel that might be a good solution in the short term,
okay.
Because I do feel that there's a backlog. Even just with a few of the development permit applications I've submitted recently, I know they're going to be sitting there for a while, and I am looking at this clock, this DCC's clock. I don't think that they're going to make it. And so then when all of a sudden I get a building permit application, or I get a building permit issued, the project's not going to be viable. Yeah. And we're talking a year and 8 months from now.
Wow.
And I've already applied for development permit back in February. So that's almost 2 years, and they're not going to meet the in-stream protection.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And just on the question of blame and accountability, I think it's more just an accountability gap and just knowing sort of where the bottleneck is so we can quickly address it. And just with the complexity of applications now, and the amount of different people that have to look at it, the professionals, externally, as well as, our internal staff, it's a lot to coordinate. And my question is just around HR. It's just like, yeah, if somebody goes away on vacation, gets sick, and then, how do all those projects they're working on get handed off to somebody, and those processes, it's easy for it to get lost. And then there's just like the gap in knowledge. Like, as the building code keeps getting updated and it's more complex, there's a whole spectrum of professionals out there. And if, some engineer misses, some little thing, or all the requirements for the CB program, like who is providing the education and awareness about all these requirements that we do have, and making sure that everybody's up to speed on all these different elements. It just seems like it's almost like the entire system, there's a gap in just support and bringing everybody up to speed on how to like coordinate and function together. And is that something that we can address? And does the city actually have to take and resource that additional facilitation role, just because we're dealing with just so many different moving parts, and nobody's up to that speed yet?
Thank you, Chair. Maybe I'll try and address that. Yeah, you're correct in identifying a trend too. We've seen quite a shift here to many complex projects and many professionals involved. And the city does have a role and does provide information resources to help guide applicants to put the information required together as well. That information is depending on the section of the code that applies. The information is typically identified in the building code as well. But we do have very sort of information-rich resources to help guide professionals, and that's some of the work that we've done with the Joint Building Permit Advisory Working Group to work on the information to guide the applicants through the requirements. As well, the professional associations have great resources to guide professionals in their role, in various roles in projects, whether it's the structural engineering or mechanical or the coordinating registered professional, and what documentation they need to submit. There are guides to letters of assurance that the professionals have to submit that talk about how to hand off those projects between professionals. And our staff, the building officials especially, are quite knowledgeable. Mr. Fox is very knowledgeable in those areas and helps to guide professionals even and through their associations to provide guidance to the professionals in how to coordinate the information and provide the documentation that's needed to support these complex projects. Hopefully that's helpful. So there are a lot of resources out there. You're right, a lot of professionals involved. Their associations help support that, as well as the city does too. So, thanks.
Great, thank you. Mr. Fox, I saw your hand move there. Did we wanting to make a comment, or?
Yeah, through the chair. I think it's just the most important thing that we can do as a building official is to respond quickly to the application. So we have put a lot of, as Mr. Holmes said, put a lot of energy into guides. We put a lot of energy into like building code analysis forms, how to make those applications, how to make them complete. I don't believe our role, although we do quite a bit of this, I don't believe our role is education. Our role as building officials is to know the regulations, review the drawings, and ensure that the projects are as code compliant as they can be when they go out the door, knowing that nothing is perfect. And but I think we should be focusing basically on that quick turnaround time of here's your preliminary review letter and these are the items that you need to address. And then it's back in the hands of the developer. And so from that point, it's basically, you know, you hire a good lawyer, you hire a good architect, or you hire, you know, you align yourself with the competent professionals, and you'll have better results. I think we need to own the first piece of it, getting those letters, preliminary review letters out quickly. And that requires resourcing, of course. And I can only speak for the building department. I can't speak for development engineering or subdivision or planning and all of their processes. But from a building permit perspective, that's where I think our focus should be. I do think Power BI is going to be a great tool specifically for managers like myself, so I can see where applications are and where things are hung up. But council has to understand that that's going to take a lot of work. We've got a 25, 30-year-old system that doesn't account for those timelines. It doesn't account for those milestones that we want to track. So we have to go back in and basically redesign every folder to include those so that Power BI can pull that data. It's only as good as the data we have. And then that's a tool for me to say, oh, look, here's this application. So instead of Mayor Krog phoning me and saying this application's hung up, what's going on, Mr. Fox? I can see it ahead of him and hopefully avoid some of those calls, but that's going to take some time. I honestly think that it's the resourcing of the different sections with the people that are required to do the work to meet the expectations of the development community. That's what we need to do.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Manley.
I'd like to move the recommended option number 1, but I have a question about the decision point for 2027-2032 financial plan, because I'd like to see us move on this as quickly as possible for the staff position, and I guess that would mean amending the 2026-2031 plan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through you to Councillor Manley. Mr. Holm did mention there was an error in the actual agenda. The annotated has the correct date, but it's the 2027 to 2031 financial plan is what the original recommendation should say. So you're requesting an amendment to that?
Yeah, if the 2026-2031 plan, is that what it should have read, 2026 to 2031?
No, it is 2027 to 2031 is what it should read.
So we can't hire somebody until the new year?
The suggestion, I think, Your Worship, or sorry, through the chair, is to bring this forward in the fall as part of your deliberations of the budget for next year and any other requests that may come from staff. I would say at this point, the idea of adding another staff member, you've heard today, we're already down 50% in that department, so I think we need some time just to fill those 2 positions, get them trained up. So I think deferring that discussion to the fall is the right choice.
Okay. I'd also like to just add an addition to the 5 recommendations, and that is that the city explore the implementation of timeline benchmarks for different aspects of the development approval process.
So if you have a seconder, you can move that as a motion altogether.
So Janice is seconding. Councillor Perino.
So that is an amendment to the recommended motions, or should we maybe?
It's not an amendment. Councillor Manley is just moving the recommended motion with an addition, but he's not doing it separately, so it's not an amendment motion. It's a motion he's just put on the floor.
So there's 4 bullets to that.
So as you can see up on the screen, there's 3. So the original number 1 and 2 is what was in the annotated agenda as the staff recommendation, and 3rd is the additional recommendation from Councillor Manley.
Okay, so that has been seconded by Councillor Perino.
And I just, to speak to it, I think we've heard a lot about this today, and just a quick conversation with staff and hearing that this is, we're moving forward with technology. We're looking at improving our timelines anyway, but that this would be, part of the process to ensure that we are meeting benchmarks, and that we're increasing reliability for the development community.
Okay, thank you. Speaker, Councillor Brown. Okay, you're good.
Thanks, Chair. I do have some questions on this particular topic that are more appropriately in camera, so it is hard for me to weigh in on how I might vote on the complete recommendations, but I would be very interested in actually adding the position immediately and finding the resources to do that. I think they're readily available. I think it's been like identified by every single person that's spoken as a need and would potentially help alleviate. So I want to trust in that, and so I won't be supporting this recommendation here. I definitely support number 2, and I don't support number 3 because I don't think there's enough specificity in what explore means. I think it's very easy to say, we explored it. So is that further information for council? Is that some work for staff? I would be looking for what that means.
I think for, thank you. I think for ease of discussion, it probably would be useful to just split up, because I do think that there is some nuances in each of these that using as a block, I think we're gonna vote in, proving it as a block of three points, we're gonna lose actually optimizing what we're actually doing here, and we won't get as good of a result. So can we do a motion to do it in seriatim, or?
You don't need a motion for that. The motion has been moved, all 3, but you can vote on them seriatim, and you don't need a motion for that.
Okay, perfect. So let's go through these in seriatim. Can we put the first point, can the first point be put on the floor for discussion separate?
They're all on the floor, but you can vote on them seriatim, so you can ask for discussion on the first point now as the chair.
So let's discuss in the first point of the staff position. So let's have discussion on that. I've got Councillor Brown. You're done? Okay, Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair. I like Councillor Brown's comments. I actually agree with them, because I was going to ask a question about the third bullet, but as far as the first bullet, I think the situation is so dire. I do think that we need to consider this sooner versus later, and if not, a full-time staff person, possibly to contract out some of the work or outsource some of it. So I think we need to look at that. So I'm not sure if that first bullet passes given those thoughts, because I don't want to lose this opportunity. I think we're just too far behind. We need to do something to move things along. So I'm not quite sure.
Great, yeah, if the
go with this.
first bullet doesn't meet what we need, we can definitely vote it down and then put forward something that might be more appropriate. Councillor Manley.
Yeah, I was just going to amend it that we add a decision point, or change our 2026-2030 financial plan to get on with it right away.
Okay, so you're amending the date for this motion.
So that we can hire right away. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe let's just vote it down if we don't want it that way, and then we can just put forward another motion to hire somebody right away. I think it's going to be easier. So let's continue on the discussion, and then we'll call a vote on this point. Yeah, Mayor Krogh.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to confirm through you to Mr. Lindsay, we're talking about 2 people down in that area at the current time. Did I understand that correctly? And so we're talking about adding a 3rd position.
And Mr. Holm can speak to this better, but my understanding is there's 4 people in that department right now. So we're down, there's 2 vacancies as of Friday. So we'll be looking to fill those positions. We are using contracted services to some extent to help that department, given the challenges they're in right now. So council, if you made this, if I understand, if this was turned down and you added the position, then we would have an additional position immediately to fill. when, of course, Ms. Mercer's not here, and she'll remind me tomorrow that we'll need to find a source to fund that from, but we can deal with that when we bring it back to council.
If I may, Chair, thank you. I mean, look, I think we've all heard the message loud and clear, but if you're telling me we're down 2 vacancies now that are budgeted for, and then you want to add a 3rd position, I just, if I only need 1 tank of gas to get to point B from point A, I'm not sure I want to pay for another tank of gas that may not be necessary entirely. And that's why I would argue that this kind of motion on the fly, keeping in mind that this is just a committee, and council can reconsider it, but I do have some concerns about adding a position without having Ms. Mercer present and in light of what Mr. Lindsay's had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons?
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, no, now we really screwed it up. Hold on.
Thank you again. If I could ask Mr. Lindsay, you cautioned us from adding the 3rd position and waiting until we have the 2 hired. Could you just flesh that out a little bit? Because currently I'm hearing the mayor's argument, but I actually feel like if we need this now and we need the resources now, we can find the money for this now. So if you could just kind of share your cautions.
It's not as much a caution through the chair as it is just a recognition that it's going to take us some time to fill the 2 positions that we have and bring those people up to speed. I guess my only caution is when you look at a singular issue like we're talking about today, it seems obvious, yeah, we should add a person. But if we come back in the fall, we'll often have in front of you multiple business cases for different points in the organization where we have pinch points or challenges. So when you weigh it amongst all the other demands that we might come forward with, you might think of it differently at that time. So certainly appreciate any support council gives, and I know the Development Services Department, Development Approvals section would appreciate additional staff, but just from the lens of the large organization, if we have some space and time, I would suggest taking that.
Thank you. I appreciate that caution, but we're not having other GPCs on pinch points. So for me, staffing up is reasonable, and we need it immediately. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, sorry, I guess I'll speak very specific to this one. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Nielsen, but the report reads for me the addition of 1 FTE, not the addition, or not, get your existing staffing complement or your existing FTEs full. And so I view that as an additional position above and beyond. And if that was the understanding that I think all the presenters had as well and expressed support for, and I also heard support for that within the folks that are working in this day in, day out. So for me, that's why I support that. I fully appreciate what Mr. Lindsay is saying, but at the same time, I'm thinking, well, if we got to go out and hire some folks, we might as well just post 2 or post 3 and do it all in one, and hopefully we get enough good candidates to fill all those spots and train them all up at once. So that's why I'm not in favor of this and would be in favor of the immediate, more immediate approach. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Councillor Eastmere?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm in favor of doing this immediately, like sooner rather than later, just because we also can't foist this off onto a future council. We don't know who is going to be sitting in these seats when it comes to time to vote for the 2027 to 31 financial plan, and we've been hearing so much about this, so I think time is of the essence, and out of respect for everyone's time, we should get on with staffing up.
Great, thank you. Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I certainly agree this I think is a priority position, but nonetheless, I always struggle with sudden last-minute motions or changes to motions, and I think Mr. Lindsay's advice is wise, that the reality is we're going to be faced with other budget priorities, and I think the time to weigh this one against those other priorities is at our budget deliberations in future. So I don't think it's going to affect anything whether we change it now or wait until later, when we can take a wider view of our whole financial situation. So I am not going to support any change to the original recommendation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. My view is that this speeding up the permitting times is a strategic priority. The backlog that we're currently facing, it has like serious economic consequences, you know, all throughout, and we need to fix this problem. And so I would be supportive of getting hiring right now, and given the amount of time that it takes to find people, I think that we should just get the job posting out there so that we can start recruiting the people that we need. And yeah, so I'm going to call the question. This one, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Motion.
Yes, unanimously fails. Yeah, motion not carried. So we'll go on to the next one unless, yeah, we'll go on to the next item, and then we can, after we're through these three, we can follow up with another motion on this issue. So the next item's direct staff to proceed with implementation of the remaining 4 recommended changes outlined in the report. Moved by Councilor Brown. Oh.
It's already on the floor, Chair, so you can just discuss that.
Okay, great. It's on the floor. Councilor Hammonds.
Thank you. Fully support this. I was happy to hear the support of the recommendations from industry reps. My question is a timeline. I don't want to give us 8 years to do this, so can we put a measure to when we will have an update on the implementation? Is that reasonable, unreasonable?
Through the chair to Councillor Hammonds, of course, the committee council can always request an update, can indicate they'd want an update in a certain time period, and we're happy to bring that back.
Thank you. Then I'd like to move that we direct staff to report, so in same as, unless Chair, I'm sorry, if you want me to do a timeline, I can do it after.
Well, are you proposing an amendment to this motion? It's on the floor.
You're right, I'll add another one. I support this recommendation, thank you.
All right, great. Councilor Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just have a question. If we were simply to change this, direct staff to proceed with implementation of the recommended changes outlined in the report, if that would just include adding the 1 FTE? Because like, wasn't that the only one that was separated out, was the first one that we just defeated?
So you're proposing direct staff proceed with the implementation of the remaining 4 recommended changes outlined in the report, including adding 1 FTE?
No, there would just be, I would amend it to direct staff to proceed with implementation of the recommended changes outlined in the report.
Okay, so you're making an amendment?
Yes.
Seconded? So for clarity now, the recommended changes includes that thing, because that wasn't in the report. Okay. Questions on the amendment? Councillor Thorpe? No. No. Councillor Perino?
Thank you. Just a question for clarity. So the recommendations, the 4 are decouple issuance of DSA, right? Are we right? From building permit process, add 1 full-time development engineering technician, introduce internal service agreements, and audit sampling of applications reviewed and certified professional program. Is that correct? The 4? Okay, so that covers us off on the person. Okay.
Great.
Okay, sorry, just one more question through you, Chair. Mr. Nielsen, we talked about the 4 weeks, if possible.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair to Councilor Perino. I think I mentioned that 4 weeks in the context of what I have seen in some other places, but I would be reluctant to, I personally would be reluctant to put that in a motion at this particular time, but.
Okay, thank you.
And I think maybe I'll just add a bit of detail. I think that was specifically in relation to the small-scale multi-unit housing.
Yes. And I would like to see it. Right, okay. Thank you.
Great. I'm not seeing any other commentary. Other than, I do think that we do need to follow up with a motion for this one, just around some accountability framework in terms of when and how the recommendations will be implemented, including a timeline for the hire, because it's not specified in the recommendations as written. But we can do that after. So all in favor? Opposed? motion carried with Mayor Krogan, Councillor Thorpe opposed. Okay, now item 3, that the city explore the implementation of timeline benchmarks for different aspects of the development approval process. Councillor Manley.
I'd like to amend my, my motion to say that, to try to make Councillor Brown happy here, that staff provide a report on the implementation of a timeline benchmarks for different aspects of the development approval process, so that we'll get a staff report.
Great. Now we have any other
Seconder.
folks? Oh, no, I can't. Councillor Brown seconded it. Discussion. I'm not seeing any. I do have some commentary. I do think, you know, for an overall accountability framework and having timelines is critical, that we can track. I do think it's part of that. It is going to be critical that we get the Power BI system implemented, and I think that's something that we're going to need to direct and have timelines on when that is going to be implemented, and maybe have further requests on what type of resourcing it's going to take to do it. And if this is something that's a priority to council, I think it may require asking staff if there's additional resources to put that in place to make it happen in a timely manner. So that's something we can follow up with. And just for clarity, when you say aspects of the development approval process, I mean, we have development approvals, rezoning, we're really talking about building permit process currently. And so just the language there is not entirely clear to me. So,
yeah, there's just different, you know, in the presentation we had, there was different parts of the process where things go to staff, and so just each of those steps, different steps.
For the building improvement
Yeah.
process, okay. Thank you. Councillor Hemmons? Yeah, so just question to staff, is that clarity? It says different aspects of the development approval process. Is that just confusing with the other permitting processes that we have with development approvals? Like, does that clear to you that that's building permit process?
Through the chair, no, it's, yeah, I mean, there's different development approval processes, as Councillor Manley referenced, so rezoning, development permit, subdivision, building permit, et cetera. But if that's not what the intention is, then yeah, it's not really clear. Like, are we talking about, are we looking at, is the idea to get at breaking down? And there's also, I mean, if we look at it, there's many different building permit types. So there's different, depending on the building permit type, whether it's like a simple tenant improvement or a complex building, there's different components of the review involved in those permit applications. So we could, I'm not sure if anybody else has anything to add on that. It's not crystal clear what's desired from my perspective.
Yeah, so are you intending for like timelines for rezoning development approvals, or you're intending for the different aspects of the building permit process within the different areas of like CP, tenant improvement, you know, residential?
So, Chair, I was just gonna basically say exactly what you said. It's just some clarification, I guess, is all that's required. Is just, are we talking specifically about building permit? I just heard a broader discussion today around other types of permits and stuff. So it's really what the committee's interested in getting feedback.
I do think I know what you're talking about. I don't think what's there is what you're talking about. I do have another motion that would probably be a lot more specific and accurate, but it's up to you.
That's the fun of motions on the fly.
All right.
Go ahead.
We can just do call the question. And then if it's voted down, I can follow up with something that's a little bit more specified. Okay. Yeah, I agree 100%. We need the timelines. I just think that this is not quite accurate, and I could follow up with a notice of motion that could give us the time, and it won't be on the fly. That would be more specific of what you're asking. So I'm going to vote opposed to this. All right, I'm going to call the question here. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay.
Chair, just before you move
Motion
on,
not carried, motion defeated.
unanimously. Before you move on, because they were amendments, could I get a motion on the main motion, which is basically now just number 2 is left, but just to seal, like, because they've both been amended, so when you have an amendment, you vote on the amendment, which you just did. Now could you just vote on the main motion as amended?
Okay,
Thank you.
vote on the main motion as amended.
Which is basically number 2, which was passed, so I believe you passed it unanimously, so that's what's left, and that's what the amended motion, the main motion as amended, you're voted on right now is as shown.
Okay. Right. So it is now on the floor. Any discussion? See none. All in favor? Oh, you did. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair, very much. Yes, and I apologize to Council, but I will have to leave in a couple of minutes. But before I go, I want to indicate that I do support this. I think Mr. Nielsen's recommendations have been very helpful, and hopefully they'll improve our timelines and our processes. But it's easy to say we endorse the report, but that means nothing unless we follow through, and we don't want to be here in 5 years from now with nothing changed. And I don't think we can rely on AI to be the magic bullet next year to save us. That's not going to happen. So I think it comes down more to people and technology. But in any case, I agree that tracking is needed, accountability is needed, and performance indicators are needed. I once, when I was in teacher training many, many years ago, had a professor who stressed time after time, quote, "If it's not monitored, it's optional," end quote. And I think that was good advice. But having said that, I also want to say through you, Chair, that I'm not interested in assigning blame or suggesting that staff has been in any way remiss in their duties. If timelines are not being met in a satisfactory manner, I think Council needs to determine or ask why that is happening. And if we need to supply staff with something they need that will enable them to be more successful, then that's on us. So that might be in the form of new technology, it might be in the form of new staff, but I think that's, again, our responsibility. And I think we all recognize that, as has been pointed out by the delegations, time is money, and we all want to do a better job of improving our timelines and saving people money. So I will be supporting this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. So I would like to put a notice, a motion forward. So it would probably go to the next council meeting. And basically it's a follow-up to the discussion that we just had, but the notice of motion is that council make improving the efficiency of the city building permit system and reducing permit processing times a council priority, and that staff, 1, return with an implementation plan for each accepted 2026 building permit process review recommendation and permit application, and Power BI dashboard to track applications, including specific milestones, deadlines, and options for additional resources that accelerate execution. Number 2, provide a quarterly written status updates to the Governance and Priorities Committee on the progress of recommendations and software implementation. And 3, that staff provide a report to reestablish explicit service standards and target timelines for each permit category, Part 9 residential, Part 3 commercial, fast track, tenant improvement, and CP program, and report performance of those standards to the GPC. And so I can send the wording
Thank you,
to staff.
As that was just a notice, that'll be for future discussion.
It's a notice, you can look it over. Great, so I think that, yeah, motion to,
No, so you're-
motion to proceed in camera now